It's really difficult to resolve this hatred. I heard that the bloody incident that happened on Heart-Cleansing Peak more than 10 years ago was related to these three families. It's impossible to resolve such a deep hatred. After silently listening for a long time, the little girl suddenly said, "Before I go back, I want to go to some places to take a look." The old man seemed to have guessed something, and a rare trace of helplessness appeared on his amiable face. After a long time, he said, 2 hours at most. All right. The little girl's answer was crisp. Flying Crane's Peak. This was one of the 72 peaks of aristocratic families. It was the place of Chi family. It was shaped like a flying crane, soaring into the sky. In the evening, a little girl riding a green donkey arrived in front of Flying Crane's Peak under the leadership of an old man. In front of the peak, there were some elite guards guarding the gate. After seeing the old man and the little girl, one of them came out and asked loudly, "Who are you? Why do you come to my Chi family?" The little girl raised her head and looked at Flying Crane's Peak quietly for a moment. Then she said, "My name is Xiaji. I'm here to kill people." Her voice was ethereal like the sound of nature, but the meaning of her words was shocking. The guard was stunned and almost couldn't believe his ears. For so many years, who dared to come to Chi family's territory and make trouble? But it just so happened that a little girl had come today and threatened to kill someone. This seemed too strange. Kill people? The guard looked strange. "Little girl, do you know where this is?" "Yes, Chi family." The little girl's voice was quiet. The guard was annoyed at once. "How dare you come here to talk nonsense? Aren't you courting death? Get out of here or you can't leave." Clang! The little girl stretched out a slender white hand, and there was a spear in her palm. The spear was more than 10 meters long. The whole spear was full of cold and hazy starlight, which was like a dream. She was wearing a black cloak with a hood covering her face. Her figure was delicate. Obviously, she was a little girl, but when she held the starlight spear, she seemed to be a different person. An unspeakable killing intent came like the eternal dark night, covering this area, making the world dim as if it was going to sink in the darkness. And the little girl was like an independent king in the darkness. Wherever the spear pointed, there was darkness. Puff! In an instant, the guard's throat was cut by an invisible blade before he could react. Blood burst out and he fell to the ground silently. His pupils were wide open and full of confusion. He couldn't understand why such a little girl dared to come to Flying Crane's Peak of Chi family to kill people. Who was she? The old man led the green donkey and stood quietly at the side. His expression was calm, and he was as benevolent as before. However, when he looked at the little girl, a complicated expression flashed across his eyes that were difficult to understand. "How dare you? How dare you kill people in the territory of Chi family? You're courting death." Some guards who guarded the mountain gate in the distance were alarmed. They roared angrily, took out their weapons and rushed to this side. Puff, puff, puff. The little girl stood there quietly. Her black cloak fluttered like a shadow in the darkness. Only the spear in her hand was full of dreamy starlight. She shook her wrist, and the guards who rushed up were like being swept by invisible sharp blades. Their throats were cut and they screamed and fell to the ground. This was a shocking bloody picture. The darkness was like a curtain covering this place. There were bloody corpses lying on the ground, staining the ground. From the beginning to the end, no one saw how the little girl attacked, and no one could struggle or resist at all. It seemed that as long as they were shrouded in the deep darkness, their lives were doomed to be harvested. "Hurry up and report that the enemy is coming," someone shouted in the mountain gate. Soon, the clansmen of Chi family were alarmed, and came one after another. This was the Forbidden City. As one of the 7 top aristocratic families, no one dared to offend Chi family for nearly 1,000 years. But now, someone dared to block in front of the mountain gate and kill them above board. This was definitely the most serious provocation to Chi family. The little girl stood there without moving. She was quiet like an eternal night, as if she didn't know what retreat and fear were in her eyes. Puff, puff. When groups of practitioners of Chi family rushed out, they were covered by the darkness without exception, and their lives were taken away as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. From the beginning to the end, no one could struggle to escape. The setting sun was like blood, but it couldn't dispel the darkness and blood here. There were many corpses lying on the ground. The thick scarlet blood soaked the earth into blood red. This was a massacre. The little girl stood there quietly, holding a dreamy spear in her hand. She let the darkness fall and judge life and death coldly and mercilessly. Until the 4 strongmen of Tao Insight Realm attacked, the little girl finally made some move. But that movement also seemed too casual and simple. Just by waving the spear in her hand, blood-colored stars appeared in the darkness, pouring and falling in the void. However, at the same time, the 4 powerhouses at the Tao Insight stage were killed on the spot. They had just taken out their treasures, were about to use their secret methods, and were about to kill their enemies with anger. But they were killed like weeds. At this moment, the big shots of Chi family were finally alarmed. A thunderous roar sounded on the flying crane's peak. Dark Knight St. Hall. How dare you attack our Chi family? It's time to go. The old man who had been watching in the distance heard the words and walked to the little girl. He didn't panic but still looked kind and calm. Yes. The little girl nodded. She came to kill people, not to die. She knew that if she stayed, she would face a lot of dangers. In an instant, 2 people and a green donkey disappeared. Old sword slave. You've gone too far. I'll go to the castle of the night to ask for an explanation. On the flying crane's peak, there was an angry roar like a god venting his anger, which shook the sky and changed the color of the wind and clouds. Cloud Tractor Peak. The place where Zhou family, one of the 7 top aristocratic families, occupied. Under the setting sun, an old man, a little girl and a green donkey appeared here. My name is Summer Solstice. I'm here to kill people. When the little girl said this, the bloody killing happened again without exception. This time, there were 46 corpses and the earth was stained with blood. When the big shots of Zhou family reacted, the old man and the little girl floated away again. Next, the same thing happened again in Yangtsang Peak, which was the territory of Qin family, one of the 7 top aristocratic families. When the sun went down and the night came, 1 hour was up. The little girl was silent for a moment and finally said, "One day, I'll destroy these 3 families." The old man finally couldn't calm down and smiled helplessly. Let's go. The old man led the green donkey and left with the little girl. On this night, the bloody massacre of Qi family, Zhou family and Qin family spread throughout the Forbidden City at an incredible speed, setting off a great uproar and making every practitioner feel an indescribable shock. In the past 1,000 years, who dared to provoke the top aristocratic families? That was an enormous power at the highest level of the empire, and it possessed great authority and monstrous might. Chapter 513. Strangely, the bloody killings in the Qi family, the Zhou family and the Qin family were blocked and suppressed in the next morning. It became confusing. No one dared to confirm just how many people had died in the 3 major clans last night and just what kind of intense conflict had erupted. But it was certain that all these were done by a little girl named Xia Solstice. Xia Solstice. A warm and simple name became famous in the Forbidden City overnight. Although people didn't know her origin, everyone was shocked by it. It could be said that she was the only one who dared to launch a bloody killing with the 3 top aristocratic forces in the past 1,000 years. The most incredible thing was that all the rumors about her were described in the image of a little girl. Why did she do this? Many people speculated that it must have something to do with Lin Sun. After all practitioners in the city now knew that only Qi family, the Zhou family and the Qin family were hostile to Lin Sun. It was obviously not a coincidence that Xia Solstice didn't go to other forces but the 3 families. There were different opinions in the outside world. The 3 families of Qi, Zhua and Qin chose to block the news with the toughest attitude. Naturally, they would not tolerate this scandal to continue to ferment. But it had happened. This was undoubtedly a signal to the world that there were still people who dared to challenge the top aristocratic forces. Xia Solstice. Who was she? Did she know Lin Sun? This was what everyone was curious about. Only some big forces knew that the origin of this little girl was not simple, but they didn't know why she did this. The outside world was full of wind and rain, but Green Deer School had already restored its former peace. It was like a pure land, undisturbed by the outside world. 2 days later, Lin Sun woke up from meditation. It was early in the morning. Birds were singing outside the window. A ray of morning light passed through the window lattice and sprinkled on the floor of the house. It was warm and bright. There was a fresh smell of grass and trees in the air, which made Lin Sun feel refreshed and comfortable as soon as he woke up. Lying lazily on the bed, Lin Sun thought of the things that happened before he fell asleep and couldn't help murmuring, "The armor of spiritual tattoos has been successfully refined, and even the dean has been alarmed. It should be big enough this time." After thinking silently for a while, Lin Sun got up and stretched himself. Opening the window, he saw the morning light pouring in. Ancient trees were luxuriant. Cranes were dancing in the clear sky, sprinkling a string of clear cries. In the distance, ancient buildings stood, bathed in the morning light. Occasionally, there were boys and girls passing by in 2s and 3s, leaving silhouettes of youth. Before long, Shen Tua came to visit. Obviously, he heard the noise and knew that Lin Sun had woken up. "Congratulations, Master Lin. Do you know who is the most popular person in the Forbidden City now?" As soon as they met, Shen Tua teased with a smile. "It seems that you are in a good mood. It seems that you, senior." Shen Tua sighed and said, "You're wrong. I'm not in a good mood." As he spoke, he flicked his sleeve and withdrew a thick stack of invitations. All of them were exquisite and peerlessly beautiful, and some invitations were even polished with the best spirit jades. One could tell with a single glance that they were extraordinary. "Look, in just a few days, dozens of big and small forces have sent invitations to invite you. These invitations are selected by me." Shen Tua stuffed a stack of invitations to Lin Sun. "Deal with them by yourself. The imperial royal family, the top aristocratic families, the middle aristocratic families, the headquarters of the commune of spiritual tattooists, the academy of spiritual implements. In a word, I can't afford to offend these forces. It's up to you." Lin Sun was in a trance. After thinking for a while, he understood and threw these invitations in the corner of the room like rubbish, which made Shen Tuo's eyes widen. Lin Sun said casually, "Senior, don't look at me like that. It's just an invitation. Even if I don't go, do they dare to regard me as their enemy?" Shen Tua sighed with emotion. "Indeed, you are different from before. Naturally, no one wants to offend you easily. By the way, have you heard of Xia Solstice?" Shen Tua suddenly asked. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes and was shocked. He asked, "Why do you mention this?" A strange look appeared on Shen Tuo's face and he said, "Just a few days ago in the evening, this mysterious little girl did a great thing." Immediately, he repeated the bloody rumor that happened in front of the gates of Qi, Zhua and Qin families. Lin Sun was in a trance. His mood fluctuated rarely and it was difficult for him to calm down. He remembered too many things. He remembered the scene when he saw Xia Solstice for the first time and the days when he was with the little girl in Feiyin village. He also remembered the serious and calm words of the little girl when they separated in Donglin City. "Lin Sun, you can't die before I come back." Inexplicably, Lin Sun's heart trembled. The little girl's beautiful and tranquil face appeared in his mind. She always seemed very special, independent, tranquil and aloof from worldly affairs, as if she lived in another world. However, Lin Sun didn't expect that after 2 years, Xia Solstice would appear in this way. Why didn't she want to see him? "Lin Sun, what's wrong with you?" Shin Tuo's voice rang in Lin Sun's ears, awakening him from his contemplation. Nothing, senior. Can you tell me where she is now? Lin Sun took a deep breath and asked. I don't know. Shin Tuo shook his head. Not to mention him, most people in the Forbidden City still didn't know where the little girl came from. Dark Night Shrine, Lin Sun murmured. Yes, she must be there. Shin Tuo suddenly thought of something and said, You said the little girl came from Dark Night Shrine? No wonder, it turns out to be so. Lin Sun was in a trance and vaguely felt that Shin Tuo seemed to think of something. Sure enough, Shin Tuo said, if the little girl really came from Dark Night Shrine, even if you go there, you are doomed to not see her. Why? Lin Sun frowned. Because yesterday, the Dark Knight Templar disappeared. Disappeared? Yes, it disappeared with Castle of the Night. This matter is very secret. Only a few people know it. I also know it occasionally. It is said that the Queen in Castle of the Night is going to pass the first test of longevity, so she has to choose to hide from the world, so as not to be disturbed by foreign enemies. Shin Tuo explained patiently. Test of longevity. Lin Sun was in a trance. He had vaguely heard before that if a life-death realm king wanted to set foot on the real way of longevity, he had to go through a test of life and death. This test was also called the test of longevity. It was said that this test involved the power of the great way of heaven. It was terrifying and immeasurable. Anyone who passed it would die. Even with the strength of life and death kings, they wouldn't dare to rashly go through the heavenly tribulation because the consequences would be too terrifying. Once they failed, they would perish without a corpse left behind. They would be erased from the world by the power of the heavenly tribulation, and there wouldn't be a trace of hope for survival. The most terrible thing was that there was a rumor in the world that the road to longevity was full of killing intent, and every step was a test of life and death. That was to say, it was not only a test that could lead to longevity, but also a test that could not be avoided when one set foot on the road to longevity. Dark Night Queen is an existence that makes countless big shots in the Empire scared. But because of this, there are many enemies in the world who hate her. If she really wants to pass the test of longevity this time, I am afraid that she will also suffer many twists and turns. Shin Tuo sighed with emotion. Dark Night Queen was a taboo name. Like a shadow, it had shrouded the darkness of the Empire for thousands of years and made countless big shots change their faces when talking about it. Now that she was going to pass the test of longevity, those enemies would certainly not stand by and watch. Fortunately, the power of the Dark Knight Templar has disappeared, as if it had evaporated from the world. Obviously, the Queen of the Dark Night also knew that when she was going through the tribulation, someone would come out to destroy it, so she had made some preparations in advance. Shin Tuo analyzed in a soft voice. Under such circumstances, not to mention you, I'm afraid even her enemies won't be able to find her so easily. Lin was silent for a while and finally sighed softly. It suddenly occurred to him that the reason why Xia Ji appeared in front of the gates of Qi family, Zhou family and Qin family in a tough manner was that she knew that she would disappear with the Dark Night Queen, so she decided to take this opportunity to do something for him. Sooner or later, I will bring you back. No matter who it is, they will never be able to take you away from me again. Lin murmured in his heart. When he thought of the scene when Xia Ji was taken away by the Dark Night Queen, there was a kind of heartache in his heart. It was a performance of powerlessness, which made people desperate and helpless. Even to this day, the old man in the Dark Knight Templar had helped him a lot, but Lin still brooded over the fact that Xia Ji was taken away. Because the feeling of being forced to accept the fate arrangement was really unforgivable. Lin, what's wrong with you? Could it be that Xia Ji is your relative? Shin Tuo clearly noticed that Lin seemed to be a little strange since he heard the name of Xia Ji. Nothing. Lin took a deep breath and tried to calm himself down. He said, By the way, what else do you want me to do today? Shin Tuo immediately knew that Lin didn't intend to mention Xia Ji again. He pondered and said, there is indeed one thing that needs you to do in person. Zhao Tailai, the boss of Tianwu Arena, came yesterday and has been waiting for you in the school. He said that if he didn't see you, he wouldn't leave even if he was beaten to death. In the end, Shen Tuo couldn't help but smile bitterly. Obviously, he was also entangled by Zhao Tailai. Zhao Tailai? Lin Sun knew that the noise he made this time had attracted the attention of the big shot in the palace. Otherwise, Zhao Tailai, a cunning guy, would not take the initiative to find him. Thinking of this, Lin Sun raised the corner of his mouth with a smile. He came at the right time. I also have something to talk to him about. Chapter 5:14. The school was quiet and full of spirit. In the early morning, many students could be seen in the school one after another. They were all young, in their prime and in high spirits. When they saw Lin Sun and Shen Tuo coming out together, there was a burst of cheers. Coach Lin! Coach Lin, we will always support you. Coach Lin, when will you teach us how to refine the armor with spiritual tattoos? Those students looked with heartfelt admiration and excitement, as well as the boldness and directness of young people. Some girls were even so excited that their cheeks flushed and their eyes were obsessed. It could be seen that Lin Sun's status in the hearts of these students was very high. If it weren't for Shen Tuo, those students would have surrounded Lin Sun. It's good to be young. Lin Sun sighed with emotion. Shen Tuo said grumpily, How old are you? I should be the one to say that. Lin Sun listened with a smile and didn't refute. When passing by the spiritual refining tower, Lin Sun unexpectedly saw a familiar figure. Chu Shanhe. But at this time, he was holding a broom and sweeping the ground in front of the spiritual refining tower like an old servant. When he glanced at Lin Sun, Chu Shanhe's face suddenly changed. His eyes flashed with resentment, anger, fear, and disappointment, which seemed extremely complicated. Finally, he snorted coldly, turned his head, and walked into the spiritual refining tower. This is the punishment given to him by the dean. He will be deprived of his position as the deputy dean of the yard and demoted to a handyman to guard the spiritual refining tower for 100 years. Shen Tuo explained. Lin Sun frowned. Isn't this punishment too light? Shen Tuo shook his head and said, You don't understand. He is a big shot in the Chu clan of spiritual tattoos and a deputy dean of the yard. How glorious he is! But now he is demoted to a handyman and loses all his power and glory. This feeling of being beaten down to the mortal world is even worse than killing him. Lin Sun thought about it and didn't say anything in the end. This was the decision of the dean, which was equivalent to giving him an explanation. How could he not be satisfied? Of course, according to Lin Sun's plan, even if he didn't kill Chu Shanhe, he should at least disable him so that he would have no chance to retaliate in the future. Guest Hall. As soon as he arrived, Lin Sun saw Zhao Tailai. As a member of the royal family, he was dressed like a merchant. He was dressed in a brocade robe and had a stout physique. With a smile, he had a natural affinity. But Lin Sun knew that this guy was the representative of craftiness. It was wishful thinking to get something out of his mouth. Oh, Master Lin finally shows up. I'm really flattered. Zhao Tailai laughed heartily as he welcomed him. Ha ha, I am overjoyed to be able to meet Senior here. Lin Sun also greeted them with a smile, looking very happy. Shen Tuo was speechless. What a pair of hypocrites! However, neither Zhao Tailai nor Lin Sun felt embarrassed at all. Instead, they warmly greeted each other as if they were old friends who hadn't seen each other for a long time. This caused Shen Tuo to be flabbergasted. Being hypocritical to such a state caused others to have no choice but to admire him. May I know why Senior has come? Lin Sun asked after a long time. Intentionally or unintentionally, he looked to the other side, where a young man in purple was sitting. He wore a feather crown on his head, a white jade belt around his waist, and a pair of green python boots on his feet. He had red lips, white teeth, sword-like eyebrows, and starry eyes. But Lin soon noticed that the young man's skin was too white and smooth, as flawless as fine jade. Between his eyebrows there was a kind of refreshing charm, which seemed very unique. "Well, before we get down to business, I'd like to introduce you. This is my nephew, Zhao Xian. I also want to see young Master Lin's elegant demeanor," Zhao Tailai said with a smile. "Nice to meet you, Taoism Peer Lin." Zhao Xian got up neatly and greeted Lin Sun with a smile, showing his white and neat teeth. His smile was as clean as a clear stream. The most special thing was that he called Lin Sun Taoism Peer. Obviously, he regarded Lin Sun as a fellow practitioner. Lin Sun also greeted him with a smile and couldn't help but praise him in his heart. The young man in purple in front of him was extremely outstanding in appearance, behavior, and speech. He was like a piece of natural clean jade, gentle and flawless, which made people feel good about him easily. Next, Shen Tua consciously left, leaving the hall to Lin Sun and Zhao Tailai. He knew that they must have something important to discuss. "This time, I come here to congratulate you on successfully refining the armor with spiritual tattoos, making you famous all over the world and leading the way in spiritual tattoos," Zhao Tailai said with a smile. "Secondly, I'm entrusted by someone with a presumptuous request." From the beginning to the end, he didn't avoid the young man in purple. Obviously, he didn't mind that some private things were overheard by the latter. Seeing this, Lin Sun immediately said with a smile, "What a coincidence. I happen to have something to trouble you, senior." Zhao Tailai's lips twitched imperceptibly, and he said with a smile, "Why don't you say it first?" "Senior, you say it first." Lin Sun declined with a smile. This time, the young man in purple couldn't help but smile without saying anything. Obviously, he also saw that Zhao Tailai and Lin Sun were testing each other. Zhao Tailai coughed and said solemnly, "Well, in fact, my presumptuous request is very simple. I just want you to help me refine a armor with spiritual tattoos." Lin Sun was stunned and said in a low voice, "This is actually easy, but I'm busy with worldly affairs now. I'm afraid it's difficult for me to spare energy." Before Lin Sun finished, Zhao Tailai interrupted him angrily. "Well, I know you won't agree so easily. Tell me, what's your condition?" Lin Sun immediately smiled. "Hey, senior, you're treating me like an outsider. But I do have something to trouble you with." "Say it." Zhao Tailai didn't want to talk nonsense anymore. He had seen that it was absolutely a waste of time to play Tai Chi with Lin Sun, and he wouldn't get any benefit. "Since you're so straightforward, I'll come straight to the point." Lin Sun laughed heartily. "I heard that there is a wheel-developing pagoda in the depths of the palace. I wonder if my friend can enter it to practice for a period of time?" When he heard the name Wheel-Developing Pagoda, Zhao Tailai's heart had already twitched. When he learned Lin Sun's real intention, he couldn't help saying, "Boy, isn't your request a little too much?" "Too much?" Lin Sun was surprised. "That's the forbidden area of the palace. Even the important figures of the royal family are not qualified to enter it. Do you think an outsider can go in?" Zhao Tailai snorted. Lin Sun frowned. "It seems that things are a little difficult. What does your friend want to do in the wheel-developing pagoda?" Suddenly, the young man in purple asked. "He has been at the peak of Tao Insight Realm for many years, and his lifespan is on the verge of exhaustion. If he can't break through, he is doomed to have an accident." Lin Sun's words immediately made the young man in purple understand. He nodded and said, "This is indeed a difficult problem. See, Spirit Realm has a lifespan of 300 years, and Tao Insight Realm has a lifespan of 600 years. If you can't break through, you will eventually die of regret and become a pile of rotten bones on the way to Tao Insight Realm." Lin Sun deeply agreed and said with emotion, "Yes, what Brother Zhao said is exactly what I want. Unfortunately, I really don't know any other way to help my friend solve this problem except entering the wheel-developing pagoda in the depths of the palace." Zhao Tailai next to him said angrily, but your request is really a little too much. That's the forbidden area of the palace. Lin Sun said, then I can only go to find others for help. I don't believe that I can't solve this problem with my means of refining spiritual tattoo armor. Seeing this, Zhao Tailai suddenly became anxious. Hey boy, what do you mean? Are you deliberately making things difficult for me? Lin Sun sighed, Senior, I dare not be disrespectful to you. But if I don't solve this problem, it will be like a block in my heart, and I won't be able to eat and sleep well. Zhao Tailai almost rolled his eyes. You obviously did it on purpose. Before he could say more, Zhao Xian, the young man in purple next to him, had already said with a smile, Taoism Peer Lin Sun, I can promise you this thing. Lin Sun was refreshed. Really? How can you do that? You can't do that. Zhao Tailai next to him shouted anxiously. Ninth uncle, it's settled. It's just a chance to enter the wheel-developing pagoda to cultivate. If I can help Taoism Peer Lin Sun solve your friend's problem, it's worth it. Zhao Xian said with a smile. He was as handsome as jade, with red lips and white teeth. His smile was as clear as a clear stream, with an indescribable temperament. At this moment, Lin Sun was finally sure that Zhao Xian's identity must be extremely aloof in the royal family. Otherwise, he would not dare to agree to this matter like this. Humph! Boy, hurry up and express your gratitude. Zhao Tailai glared at Lin Sun. Lin Sun looked serious and cupped his hands seriously. Brother Zhao's great kindness, I will never forget it. I will repay it in the future. You're welcome. Zhao Xian smiled, his eyes dark and bright. Isn't it easy to repay? This time, you just need to help me refine a piece of spiritual tattoo armor that can survive the thunder test. Zhao Tailai squinted at Lin Sun. I'll do my best. Lin Sun promised very quickly. Then he changed the topic and said thoughtfully, I just don't know what kind of spiritual tattoo armor you want to refine and for whom? A tripod. It was Zhao Xian who answered. At this moment, he seemed to have become another person, with a serious appearance and an indescribable majesty. Tripod? Yes, strictly speaking, it's called Treasure Tripod of 9 Dragons. I hope Taoism Peer Lin Sun can help me refine it. With it, I can go to the ancient desolation territory to cultivate without worry. As soon as Zhao Xian said this, Lin Sun was finally sure that Zhao Tailai came here today for Zhao Xian. Okay. After thinking for a while, Lin Sun agreed. Lin Sun would not refuse Zhao Tailai's agreement to let Zhu Laosan enter the wheel-developing pagoda to cultivate. Suddenly, Zhao Tailai next to him also breathed a long sigh of relief, relaxed and smiled. However, when Zhao Tailai thought that all this would end in a satisfactory way, he saw Zhao Xian suddenly stand up, look at Lin Sun, and say with a smile. Chapter 5:15. Lin Sun was also a little surprised. He didn't expect that Zhao Xian would make such a request. Come on, let's have a try. It's just a martial arts competition. Zhao Xian smiled slightly. His purple clothes fluttered, and his 5 fingers drew a mysterious trajectory, as light as picking flowers. The airflow in the room suddenly buzzed and collapsed with Zhao Xian as the center, causing a terrible collapse and destruction force to suppress Lin Sun in it. As soon as an expert made a move, one would know whether he was a real expert or not. It was just a light grasp, but there was a terrible destructive power that could collapse the sky and the earth. There was no doubt that Zhao Xian had reached a terrible level in martial arts. Without thinking, Lin Sun stepped forward with ice dragon steps instead of retreating. He clenched his fists and struck out like lightning. It was simple, clean and direct, which was the weakness of Zhao Xian's grasp. With a bang, the airflow in the room burst out and swept around. Really good. Zhao Xian's eyes brightened and he praised. His figure was like a breeze, and in an instant, his fingers had cut across Lin Sun's throat. Lin Sun couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. Without thinking, he spun like a top and flew up without touching the ground. But to Lin Sun's surprise, before he got close, Zhao Xian suddenly stretched out like a dragon coming out of the abyss. His fingers formed a seal and knocked on Lin Sun's fist. Bang! When the two collided, Lin Sun only felt that his bones were hit by a hammer, causing a sense of numbness. His eyes suddenly narrowed. His body was now tempered to be extremely strong and almost perfect. It was comparable to a divine weapon, which was hard to be hurt. But the power of Zhao Xian's blow could make him feel as if he was struck by lightning and produce numbness, which was too unusual. What a powerful physique! Don't tell me he's also cultivating a body-refining technique? Zhao Xian's eyes were bright like stars. When he spoke, he strode forward. Every step he took, purple dragon patterns appeared on the ground, like a dragon coming back to life, which made his momentum rise steadily. Lin Sun was also aroused to fight. He displayed the 9 strikes for shaking heaven to fight with Zhao Xian. For a while, figures flew in the hall and the wind roared. If both of them hadn't deliberately restrained their strength and breath, the hall would have been destroyed. After a while, Zhao Xian flickered and gently shot out his palm. But it was like a dragon soaring in the sky, suppressing all directions and pressing forward. Boom! Under this blow, Lin Sun took 3 steps back, and his blood was boiling, which made him look dignified. Ever since his cultivation reached the Sea of Soul's realm, it was his first time encountering a powerful existence like Zhao Xian. It was also his first time feeling an unprecedented pressure. Others regarded him as a monster with heaven-defying power, but the Zhao Xian in front of him was obviously not inferior at all, and even more terrifying. Who was this guy? Why hadn't he heard of it before? It was even to the extent that he wasn't inferior to that Gu Yun Ting. Thinking of this, Lin Sun didn't slow down at all. He didn't dare to hold back anymore and displayed all the martial arts he had mastered. Bang bang bang! In the hall, Lin Sun's fists shot out fiercely. Sometimes it was like splitting mountains and seas, sometimes it was like a dragon breaking through the sky, sometimes it was like suppressing the world, and sometimes it was like devouring the sky and destroying the void. All right. Zhao Xian's robes fluttered in the wind. His purple robes seemed to be on fire. His eyes grew brighter and brighter, not concealing his admiration at all. Compared with Lin Sun, Zhao Sun was like a dragon, roaring between heaven and earth, overlooking the mountains and rivers, with a kind of brave and vigorous spirit of dominating the world. However, hearing these praises, Lin Sun felt a little awkward. Since he started his cultivation, he had always dominated among his peers, and even killed those in Tao Insight realm. He had already cultivated invincible self-confidence in his heart, so he naturally couldn't agree with this kind of praise. Boom! Without any nonsense, Lin Sun's momentum changed again, and his moves changed, simple, natural, plain, and without a trace of smoke and fire. But the power of his punches was stronger than before, implying the essence of returning to nature. However, what made Lin Sun frown was that at the same time he became stronger, Zhao Xian on the opposite side also became stronger, and didn't let Lin Sun gain any advantage at all. This guy is really a freak, Lin Sun muttered to himself. He didn't know that Zhao Xian was more surprised than him. He just wanted to test whether Lin Sun's martial power was as powerful as the rumor said. But it turned out that Lin Sun's fighting capacity was more exaggerated than the rumor. What a freak! Zhao Xian also muttered to himself. For calling Lin Sun a freak, Zhao Tailai also thought so at the moment. When he saw that Lin Sun and Zhao Xian fought evenly, he was stunned and rarely stunned. He knew very well how horrible Zhao Xian was, but Lin Sun could do this. He could only be described as a freak. Boom! When Lin Sun's attack was resolved again, Zhao Xian suddenly stopped. Don't fight! Lin Sun frowned. If we fight again, it won't be a fight. Zhao Xian smiled slightly, showing his white and neat teeth, and his smile was as bright as the sun. Boy, don't be convinced. It's very rare that you can do this. Zhao Tailai sighed. Lin Sun smiled and didn't comment. He hadn't used his real trump card, so he naturally couldn't agree with this view. You are really good. At least in the sea spirit realm, it's hard to find an opponent. Zhao Xian seemed to have approved of Lin Sun, and his tone became much gentler. He said softly, "If there is a chance, I hope you can go to the ancient desolation territory. There are countless peerless figures who are as dazzling as comets. Only there can you and I really understand the meaning of the struggle for the Great Way." There was a faint yearning between his eyebrows. "If there is a chance, I will definitely go there." Lin Sun also extinguished his inner fighting spirit and said casually. Zhao Xian smiled slightly, said no more, and left. Zhao Tailai stayed. He wanted to continue to talk with Lin Sun about refining the Treasure 9 Dragon Cauldron. Watching Zhao Xian leave, Lin Sun was silent for a moment and suddenly asked, "Who is this girl?" Zhao Tailai was stunned and said, "Sure enough, I still can't hide it from you. She is the only child of the current Emperor and Empress, Princess Jing Xian." Princess Jing Xian? Lin Sun felt very strange about it. He only knew that Princess Ling Wang was a proud and annoying girl. It's normal that you don't know Princess Jing Xian. When she was born, she was sent to the ancient desolation territory to cultivate in an ancient holy land. She returned to the empire last year and rarely showed her face. Few people in the world know her existence. Zhao Tailai sighed with emotion. But there is no doubt that Her Highness Jing Xian is a peerless and outstanding figure who has inherited the bloodline of the current great emperor and empress. Since childhood, she has studied the supreme inheritance of the royal family, the imperial dragon commanding scripture, and the ancient secret scripture, the feather transformation scripture. The rarest thing is that Princess Jing Xian is intelligent and unparalleled. At the age of 7, she had entered the sea spirit realm. At the age of 13, she stepped into the Tao Insight realm, which is a miracle in the ancient desolation territory. But later, the current emperor thought that her cultivation was too smooth. Once she encountered a setback, there would be unpredictable dangers, so he personally suppressed her realm. Now, it has been 10 years. If she hadn't been suppressed for 10 years, I'm afraid that with Princess Jing Xian's foundation, she would have already entered the reincarnation developing realm. Hearing this, Lin Sun couldn't calm down and was shocked. Sure enough, there was no shortage of geniuses in the world. If what Zhao Tailai said was true, Princess Jing Xian was simply a natural talent in cultivation, with unimaginable talent and foundation. In addition, her father was the current emperor, and her mother was the current empress. Since she was a child, she had entered an ancient pure land in the ancient desolation territory, which enabled her to advance bravely and unstoppably on the road of cultivation. Perhaps such a peerless girl could be called a real genius. She was like the sun and the moon in the sky, enough to make countless practitioners feel inferior. Now, you should understand how lucky you are to get the approval of Princess Jing Xian just now, right? Zhao Tailai said with emotion. She has her way, and I have my way. It makes no difference whether she approves me or not, Lin Sun said casually. As a practitioner, he should stick to his own Taoist heart, otherwise he would lose his drive and the desire to advance. Who would be the first in the struggle for the Tao? It was too early to talk about superiority or inferiority at this time. Seeing that Lin Sun was calm and unaffected, Zhao Tailai was surprised. After a while, he said with amazement, "Amazing! You are definitely the most special one among the young talents I have ever seen." Lin Sun said with a smile, "Senior, you are also the most unfathomable person I have ever seen. Let's talk about it now. Is it your idea or the idea of the big shot in the palace that Princess Jing Xian came to see me this time?" Zhao Tailai laughed. "You have been appreciated by Princess Jing Xian. What's the difference between asking these questions? Do you remember what I told you last time? The better you perform, the more attention you will receive from the Empire. Hasn't it come true now?" Lin Sun suddenly had a headache and couldn't help but stare at him. This old guy was too slippery. It was more difficult to get a clear answer from him than to climb to the sky. That's it. After your press conference in Keystone Business is over in a few days, I will send you the spiritual materials and illustrations for refining the Nine Dragons cauldron. At that time, you must not screw up. It's fine if you offend Marquis Lingtian and Her Highness Spirit Phoenix, but if you make Her Highness Jing Xian unhappy, then I won't be able to help you anymore. After chatting for a while, Zhao Tailai said goodbye and left in a hurry. He ran faster than anyone else like an old rabbit for fear of being asked by Lin Sun again. It seems that Princess Jing Xian's status in the imperial family is really unparalleled. Even Marquis Lingtian and Princess Spirit Phoenix can't compare with her. Lin Sun was thoughtful. He knew that Zhao Tailai must have deliberately said this to him. Immediately, Lin Sun shook his head and stopped thinking about it. He had decided to meet Lin Zhong and Zhu Laosan as soon as possible. Chapter 5:16. That night, Zhu Laosan and Lin Zhong came to Green Deer School together. When Zhu Laosan heard that Lin Sun had obtained the permission of the royal family to let him enter the tower to practice, he, a silent and fierce man, couldn't help being moved. He showed a rare look of excitement, trance and excitement. "Thank you very much." When he calmed down, Zhu Laosan uttered 3 words from his lips. This might be the first time he thanked someone. His words seemed a little stiff, but Lin Sun was quite gratified. He had always been full of affection for Zhu Laosan. In order to repay kindness, Zhu Laosan could give up everything. In order to fulfill his promise, he could even disregard his life and death. People like him were the most admirable and worthy of making friends. Before long, Zhao Tailai sent someone to pick up Zhu Laosan and disappeared from Green Deer School. This was what Lin Sun and Zhao Tailai had agreed for a long time. Lin Sun believed that as long as Zhu Laosan could firmly grasp this opportunity, he should have enough hope to break through. In this way, Zhu Laosan could not only solve the problem of the exhaustion of his lifespan, but his cultivation would also advance by leaps and bounds. He would enter a new realm and become a real grand practitioner of the reincarnation development realm. At that time, with Zhu Laosan in charge of Heart Cleansing Peak, he could at least play a great deterrent role in recovering the 3 collateral forces of Westbrook School, Floating Cloud School and Flying Peak School. Young master, I didn't expect that you had really refined the armor with spiritual tattoos. Now on Heart Cleansing Peak, everyone is so excited to celebrate for you. Lin Zhong sighed with emotion. In fact, he looked quite excited. Let's not celebrate. Now I just want to know how the 3 collateral forces of Lin family will feel after hearing these things. Lin Sun said slowly. Them? Humph, they must be extremely terrified. Lin Zhong snorted coldly, and his eyes were full of coldness. During the 2 months when Lin Sun was in closed-door cultivation, the 3 collateral forces turned to Zhou family and Qin family. They thought they had found a backer, so they became arrogant again and often went to Heart Cleansing Peak to provoke and humiliate them. Now Lin Sun had become a young spiritual tattooist who could refine armor with spiritual tattoos. He was famous all over the world. Moreover, he was recognized by the dean of Green Deer School. Under such circumstances, as long as the 3 collateral forces of Lin family were not stupid, they knew that it was impossible to deal with Lin Sun again. Most importantly, Lin Sun's power was strong enough to threaten the 3 collateral forces and make them feel uneasy. I gave them 3 years to think about it. Now almost a year has passed. If they refuse to come to their senses, I won't show any mercy when the time comes. Lin Sun took a deep breath and said calmly. After saying that, he and Lin Zhong entered a secret room that Shen Tuo had specially prepared. The secret room was covered in dense and terrifying spirit arrays that were capable of isolating all perception and investigation. Even Shen Tuo could only wait outside and was unable to sense what was happening inside. But Shen Tuo had already guessed that Lin Sun and Lin Zhong must be testing the armor with spiritual tattoos. I wonder just how mysterious that spear is. As soon as Shen Tuo thought of the scene of Lin Sun refining a spiritual weapon that day, he couldn't help but feel excited. A spiritual tattoo armor that had passed the thunder test was unprecedented. It could be regarded as the first one in the Empire. However, even though they had personally witnessed such a grand occasion, no one knew exactly what grade the spear belonged to, how profound it was, and how powerful it was. As a senior spiritual tattoo master, Shen Tuo was also eager to have a closer contact with such a precious treasure. Unfortunately, he also knew that it was impossible for Lin Sun to let others know these in the current situation. Perhaps only when the press conference held by Keystone Business begins can we know some truth and mysteries, Shen Tuo murmured in his heart. Immediately, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. Speaking of the upcoming press conference, the Forbidden City was going crazy now. In order to get a ticket to attend the press conference, all the major forces couldn't sit still and took action one after another to participate in it at all costs. As far as Shen Tuo knew, a ticket to the press conference had been sold at a sky-high price of 10,000 gold coins. The most terrible thing was that it couldn't be bought even if there was a price. It could be seen from this that the armor with spiritual tattoos refined by Lin Sun caused a great sensation and influence. Fortunately, I got an admission ticket from Keystone Business in advance thanks to that boy. Otherwise, I'm afraid I won't have a place in the press conference. Shen Tuo laughed at himself. He was a senior spiritual tattooist in Green Deer School, but now he needed to get a ticket through Lin Sun. How could he not sigh with emotion? Suddenly, Shen Tuo gathered his chaotic thoughts, because he saw that the tightly shut door of the secret room had been pushed open. Lin Zhong was the first to walk out, but his expression was extremely absent-minded while his gaze still carried the remnants of surprise, shock, and disbelief. He seemed as if he'd just experienced the ravages of an unprecedented storm. "How is it?" Shen Tuo couldn't help asking. Lin Zhong was stunned. He took a long breath and patted Shen Tuo on the shoulder, saying, "You'll understand when the press conference begins." Hearing this, Shen Tuo felt more and more itchy in his heart. Unfortunately, Lin Zhong kept his mouth shut, which made Shen Tuo feel helpless. Without delay, Lin Zhong left Green Deer School at night and took away the long spear named Shattering Sorrow by Lin Sun. A spiritual tattoo armor that could survive the thunder test. Lin Sun, what's the mystery of this spear? Shen Tuo was still unwilling to give up, so he asked Lin Sun. Lin Sun thought for a while and said, "I'm not sure. Although this spear was refined by me, its power and mystery had changed at the moment of success, which surprised me a little." Shen Tuo agreed with this very much. He also had extremely rich experience in refining weapons. He knew that when refining some extraordinary treasures, even the spiritual tattooist himself could not predict what kind of transformation would happen at the moment when he successfully finished refining them. But there was no doubt that this kind of transformation was definitely not bad. "Now that you mention it, I'm looking forward to it even more." Shen Tuo sighed. Lin Sun couldn't help but smile and said, "Senior, how about I give you a copy of the design blueprint of this spear?" Shen Tuo's eyes suddenly lit up. This was a precious material whose value could not be measured by money. Because it was the crystallization of a spiritual tattooist's wisdom and painstaking efforts, imprinted with all kinds of mysteries about spiritual tattoos. "Really?" Shen Tuo was so excited that his voice trembled and he swallowed hard. Lin Sun took out a roll of thick animal skin paper and handed it to him, saying, "Senior, you have helped me a lot these days. Take this as a token of my appreciation. But please burn it after reading it." Shen Tuo nodded repeatedly and immediately swore not to leak a word. He looked as excited as a child who had got a new toy. This was a spiritual tattooist who was obsessed with spiritual tattoos. It could be imagined how excited and ecstatic he would be when he had the opportunity to see a design blueprint of a spiritual tattoo armor. Lin Sun smiled slightly. Shen Tuo and he were both teachers and friends. Since he entered Green Deer School, Shen Tuo had been taking good care of him. Even if it was just to repay the kindness, Lin Sun would never be stingy with a design blueprint. During this period, the Forbidden City was turbulent. Many practitioners in the Forbidden City were still full of excitement when recalling this period of time many years later. Keystone Business was the largest business force in the empire, and its headquarters was one of the top businesses in the Forbidden City. Perhaps only some commercial forces under the royal family could be a little better than the headquarters of Keystone Business. But during this period, the headquarters of Keystone Business dominated the market. It was like a magnet, firmly attracting the attention of the whole Forbidden City and even the whole empire. It started a few days ago. On that day, Lin Sun, as a young spiritual tattooist, refined a spiritual tattoo armor by himself and attracted the thunder punishment, which caused a sensation in all directions. Spiritual tattoo armor. Even in the aristocratic families, it was a rare treasure, and its value could not be measured by money in the secular sense. It was no exaggeration to say that, except for the superior aristocratic families, some of the weaker aristocratic families didn't have any spiritual tattoo armor at all. Its rarity could be seen from this. It was absolutely not an exaggeration to say that owning a spiritual tattoo armor could change the pattern of a force. In the past, even a spiritual tattoo guru would need at least a month to refine a spiritual tattoo armor, and the success rate was not high. In the whole Forbidden City, the number of spiritual tattoo gurus could be counted with fingers, and there were no more than 10 of them. It was so difficult to refine a spiritual tattoo armor. It could be imagined how difficult it was for others to get a spiritual tattoo armor. In fact, it was true. In today's big forces, even if they had a spiritual tattoo armor, most of them were treasures inherited from their ancestors. Therefore, when it was heard that Lin Sun alone refined a spiritual tattoo armor in less than a month, it caused a great stir in the whole world. Not only the aristocratic families, but also many spiritual tattooists were attracted by it. They were eager to know more secrets. For example, how did Lin Sun do it? What kind of amazing power did this armor with spiritual tattoos have? And so on. The headquarters of Keystone Business naturally became the focus of attention from all sides. Because the conference of Lin Sun's spiritual tattoo armor would be held in the headquarters of Keystone Business. Lin Sun, the headquarters of Keystone Business, the auction of spiritual tattoo armor. These keywords, like a big hand, affected the Forbidden City and attracted the attention of the whole world. They became the hottest topic of discussion at the moment. Even in other territories of the empire, these news were widely spread. Chapter 5:17. In front of the headquarters of Keystone Business. The sky had yet to brighten, but the huge arena was already filled with figures, forming a dense mass of people. Those who could pass through this venue and enter the headquarters of Keystone Business were either from aristocratic families or big shots. Feng Qingyu appeared in the venue. She was dressed in plain clothes, with her black hair hanging down. Her face was plain and beautiful, and her skin was delicate. Before Lin Sun rose to fame, this girl from Feng family had the title of Genius Girl, shining with dazzling light in the field of spiritual tattoos. Even now, she was still an influential figure among the young generation of spiritual tattooists, attracting much attention. Beside her, there was a beautiful woman in simple clothes with a quiet temperament. Her face was as calm as still water and as indifferent as drifting clouds. After listening for a while, Feng Qingyu wrinkled her nose and muttered, "The entrance ticket has increased by another 3,000 imperial gold coins. It seems that Lin Sun is very popular." The beautiful woman smiled and said, "After all, it's the release conference of a young spiritual tattooist. People will inevitably be curious." Feng Qingyu asked curiously, Teacher, do you think the death of shattering is really as powerful as the rumor says? The beautiful woman said casually, I'll know when I see it with my own eyes. At this time, there was a sudden commotion in the distance. Then, Yu Beidou, Qing Jing and other spiritual tattooists appeared in the venue. They came from the headquarters of the Commune of Spiritual Tattooists and the Academy of Spiritual Implements of the Empire. They were already the leading figures in the field of spiritual tattoos. As soon as they appeared, they immediately caused an uproar. However, when Yu Beidou and others saw the beautiful woman beside Feng Qinyu, they were all stunned, and then they all took the initiative to come forward. Greetings, Mrs. Bao Hua. I didn't expect that senior would also come. Yu Beidou and others all showed a touch of respect, which shocked many people nearby. Only then did they realize that the beautiful woman was also a big shot. Bao Hua, long time no see. Beside Yu Beidou and others, there was a thin old man with unkempt hair. If Lin Sun was here, he would definitely recognize that the old man was old Mo. He was a spiritual tattooist who had developed a new type of Ziying battleship in the bloodthirsty camp. Old Mo looked very excited at the moment. His eyes were shining, but he seemed a little reserved, as if he couldn't believe that he could meet the beautiful woman here. Senior brother Mo, you are also here. I haven't heard from you for many years. The beautiful woman faintly smiled. Sigh back then, Old Mo heaved a deep sigh. When he was about to say something, he heard a burst of laughter from afar. It turns out that everyone has arrived. Old Mo's face darkened at once. Then he saw a dignified man with neatly trimmed hair and beard striding toward him. Seeing this dignified man, Yu Beidou and the others immediately stopped smiling and cupped their hands in greeting. Greetings, Master Luo. Brother Luo. The beautiful woman nodded. Elder Mo snorted coldly, and his face became gloomier. He looked at the dignified man with a trace of hatred in his eyes. Ha ha, what a coincidence today. Because of a junior's press conference, we've actually reunited. It's truly rare. Come, let's go in and have a good chat. The dignified man laughed and led everyone to the headquarters of Keystone Business. That's Madame Bao Hua, the symbol of our yard of spiritual tattoos, and also a spiritual tattooist. She has been living in seclusion for more than 20 years to study spiritual tattoos. I didn't expect that she would come here today. The headquarters of the Commune of Spiritual Tattooists was a magnificent 9-story building. At this time, Shen Tuo was whispering behind a window on the 9th floor. Speaking of Madame Bao Hua, Shen Tuo couldn't hide his respect. Madame Bao Hua was a living legend. She had refined as many as 5 pieces of armors with spiritual tattoos, each of which was a peerless treasure and famous all over the world. For example, a piece of spiritual tattoos named Regretless Proud Dragon in the hands of the current emperor was made by Madame Bao Hua. What's the relationship between her and Old Mo? Lin Sun saw Old Mo and his heart was stirred. But he also noticed that when Old Mo saw Madame Bao Hua, he was unusually restrained and excited, which surprised him a little. He remembered that Old Mo was very eccentric and aloof. They are fellow apprentices. Shen Tuo said, I heard that Madame Bao Hua also had a lot to do with Old Mo's disappearance from the Forbidden City. Did Madame Bao Hua force Lin Sun to leave? Lin Sun frowned. Shen Tuo shook his head and was about to say something. Suddenly, he narrowed his eyes and said, Look, Master Luo is also here. Who is he? Lin Sun looked over and saw a man with neat hair and a dignified bearing. Luo Feng, one of the few spiritual tattooists in the Academy of Spiritual Implements of the Empire. He is well known all over the world and admired by many spiritual tattooists. It is said in the Forbidden City that his attainments in spiritual tattoos have reached the acme of perfection. Few people can compare with him. Shen Tuo's expression was a little strange. He had a lot to do with Old Mo's disappearance from the Forbidden City. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes, so he is the real master. Senior, Do you know the hatred between him and old Mo? Shin Tua said in a low voice. I only heard that it seems to be because of Madame Baohua. Because of her? Lin Sun was stunned, and a scene of two men fighting for a woman naturally emerged in his mind. After the press conference, you can go and ask them yourself. Shin Tua also scratched his head because he didn't know much about it. Lin Sun nodded. When he was in the bloodthirsty camp, old Mo had helped him a lot. If old Mo really had a grudge against Luo Feng, Lin Sun would never sit back and do nothing. The arrival of Master Luo Feng and Madame Baohua soon spread throughout the conference and aroused a lot of discussion. It was rare for them to come to the conference in person as they were the masters of spiritual tattoos. However, almost all the people who came to participate in the press conference today were great figures who could shake a region. Thus, it did not cause too much of a commotion. Just like at this time, the big shots who came to the conference included the heads of the aristocratic families in the Forbidden City, the dignitaries in the imperial family, the generals with real power in the imperial army, and the giants from all over the empire. It could be said that each of them had enough power and influence to make the world tremble. Now, all these big shots were gathered in one place. Just this scale alone could be said to be an unprecedented grand occasion. The conference gradually quieted down, and it was time for the conference to begin. A man in formal attire walked on the platform. After coming on the platform, he first saluted to the four sides, and then began to speak. His name was Lian. He was handsome, elegant, and charming, and his words were very infectious. Welcome to the conference of Master Lin Sun. As we all know, although Master Lin Sun is young, he has already become a famous young talent in the Forbidden City. The rarest thing is that Master Lin Sun has an unimaginable talent and understanding in spiritual tattoos. Not only did he cause the vision of 9 dragons, but he has also become a popular teacher in Green Deer School. In today's conference, we will show a piece of spiritual tattoo armor made by Master Lin Sun, Death of Broken. When he spoke up to hear, Lian's voice paused, and then he clapped his hands. Instantly, a young woman brought over a bronze box that was a meter long. Everyone, the Death of Broken is in the bronze box in front of me. Swish! Countless gazes converged on the bronze box placed in front of Lian. Many people couldn't help but stretch their necks and widen their eyes. Divine light shot out from their eyes, as if they could see what was inside the bronze box, just by doing so. The atmosphere was also stirred up at once, and everyone was full of expectations. However, Lian smiled and said, "Before I show you the armor with spiritual tattoos, please allow me to introduce the process of the birth of this treasure." Everyone immediately cursed in their hearts, wishing to strangle this guy to death. He was so good at keeping people in suspense. You must have heard that just 10 days ago, in Green Deer School, Master Lin Sun finally succeeded in refining the shatter after more than 20 days. When this treasure was born, there was a thunder retribution and an unprecedented phenomenon. This is something that has never happened before. Everyone patiently listened to Lian's long-winded rambling. In the end, Lian concluded, "In short, this is destined to be a treasure different from other spiritual tattoo armors. It's a peerless weapon that can amaze the world." Maybe you think I'm exaggerating, but I can guarantee that when you see the mystery of this treasure with your own eyes, you will definitely find that the magic of this treasure is even more exaggerated than what I said. All the people in the auditorium held their breath. Lian's words completely aroused their curiosity and made them more expectant. Some hot-tempered bigwigs couldn't help but scold, "Don't keep us guessing. Will you be satisfied until I die of anxiety?" Even some of the more shrewd people found it difficult to conceal their anticipation. Lian took a deep breath, and his face suddenly turned red. He said, "Don't worry, everyone. I can tell you responsibly that today's press conference is destined to be a miracle." There was a trace of trembling and excitement in his voice, which was heard by many people, making them more curious and expectant. Most people were anxiously looking forward to it. No matter whether he was bragging or not, the fact that this spiritual tattoo armor had passed the thunder tribulation was enough to attract them. And some bigwigs of the older generation couldn't help but frown, feeling that Leon was exaggerating a little too much. Miracle? There had been spiritual tattoo armors in the past, but who dared to call it a miracle? Young people nowadays are really impatient. It's just a spiritual tattoo armor, but they make a press conference so exaggerated. It's a bit of grandstanding. Suddenly someone said indifferently. It was Luo Feng, the spiritual tattoo guru from the Academy of Spiritual Implements of the Empire, which attracted many people's attention. Chapter 518. Unexpectedly, not long after Grandmaster Luo Feng finished his words, someone sneered. There are talents in every generation, and each of them has been outstanding for hundreds of years. I'd like to ask, what do you mean by playing to the gallery? It was old Mo who spoke. His words were direct and he questioned Luo Feng, which surprised everyone. It was rare for someone to refute Luo Feng. However, Luo Feng said calmly, Old Mo, when you refine a suit of spiritual tattoo, you can ask me this question. In other words, you want to question me? You're not qualified. I'm just telling you that today is Lin Sun's press conference. If you don't like him, you can leave. You don't have to take advantage of your seniority. Old Mo snorted. Everyone was a little surprised. They guessed that there must be some conflict between Old Mo and Luo Feng. Otherwise, how could they oppose each other on such an occasion? Old Mo. Luo Feng's face darkened and his voice became cold. It seems that you have a problem with me. Do you want to take this opportunity to settle old scores? Why not? Old Mo was also very tough, and his eyes were full of hatred. The atmosphere immediately became tense. No one had expected that there would be people arguing before they could even see the true face of the shattered death. Please calm down. We're all here to see Master Lin's masterpiece. It's inevitable to have some doubts. On the high platform, the host Lian smiled and said, after showing the magic of broken death, I believe everyone will be happy to hear Senior Luo Feng and Old Mo's comments. At that time, I hope the two seniors in the field of spiritual tattoos will give us some advice. His words were very beautiful. He flattered them without a trace, and also hinted that even if they wanted to argue, it wouldn't be too late to wait until the spiritual tattoo suit was shown. Brother Luo, Old Mo, what do you think? At this time, Madame Baohua also spoke with a graceful temperament. Old Mo's expression softened and he nodded. Okay, I'd like to see who's playing to the gallery. Luo Feng said expressionlessly, a spiritual armor born from Thunder Doom may be extremely powerful, but I doubt whether its spirit has been wiped out in the Thunder Doom. If so, the so-called spiritual armor is just an empty shell. Of course, it's difficult for ordinary people to see these differences. His abrupt words obviously showed that he had a different view on the spiritual tattoo battle equipment made by Lin Sun. This made many people ponder. Luo Feng was the only remaining Grandmaster of Spirit Rune in the Academy of Spiritual Implements of the Empire. He was famous all over the world and was respected by countless Spirit Rune masters. He was like the authority of the Spirit Rune world. Since he expressed a different view on this matter, it was not up to others to not take it seriously. Brother Luo is right. However, it's still too early to say all this. Perhaps we'll be able to get a clear answer after we see it for ourselves. Before Elder Mo could speak, Madame Baohua spoke first, apparently worried that the two would continue to quarrel. At this point, the episode came to an end. However, it was also this episode that made the audience more expectant. Before the spiritual tattoo battle equipment made by Lin Sun started to show, it had caused a dispute among the leading figures in the Spirit Rune world, which had never happened before. The atmosphere became quiet again, and everyone's eyes were focused on the high platform. Lian stopped talking nonsense and smiled slightly. Time is precious. Next, please witness this masterpiece from Master Lin Sun. After saying that, he turned around and walked off the high platform. At the same time, a thin figure appeared on the high platform. The man stood straight, with his cheeks as sharp as a knife. He looked a little old, and his eyebrows were full of vicissitudes. However, there was a commotion in the auditorium. Many people couldn't sit still and cried out in surprise. "This seems to be the bronze charming Shin Jingluan? Gosh, it's really Shin Jingluan. I haven't heard from him for many years. I never thought that he would become so old now. It's really him." It's said that he followed the former patriarch of Lin family and concealed his identity. Now that he appeared here, he must represent Lin Sun to demonstrate the magic of shattering sorrow in person. Bronze charming Shin Jingluan. Many years ago, he was a well-known figure in the Forbidden City. He was regarded as a talent of his generation, and even the current emperor had praised him. At that time, he was outstanding. He rode across the capital on a white horse and won many praises. He was regarded as a proud son with a promising future. Who could imagine that after so many years, the bronze charming Shin would reappear in the world? However, after the excitement there was a burst of emotion. Time was like a knife cutting people's old age. Shin Jingluan was so handsome and elegant in those years, but now his face was full of hardships. How could people not sigh? So long as the geniuses that rose up with him didn't fall, then they would have become overlords of an area and shook the world with their might. However, only he transformed into an old servant and concealed his identity. He was practically forgotten by the people of the world and only left behind a few sighs. The audience was in an uproar and sighed with emotion, but Lin Zhong on the high platform seemed to be unaware of it. He silently came to the center and opened the bronze box. From the beginning to the end, he was like an unattractive old servant. No one could imagine that he was once famous in the Forbidden City and had an elegant demeanor. Buzz. A clear sound, like the sound of Taoism, immediately attracted the attention of all the people present. A dim gray luster appeared in Lin Zhong's hand. At this moment, his momentum changed abruptly as if he was a different person. If the previous Lin Zhong was an old servant with a face full of hardships, then the current him was like an unsheathed treasured sword, sharp and threatening. Many people's eyes brightened. They held their breath and concentrated. The atmosphere was terrible and silent. On the high platform, Lin Zhong didn't demonstrate immediately. He lowered his eyebrows and eyes, silent like a mountain. It seemed that he was adjusting himself. Standing casually, there was an invisible and frightening momentum spreading. Some big shots in the field had a flash of brilliance in their eyes. They could feel that Lin Zhong's momentum was rising constantly, as if a dragon dormant in his body was waking up from a deep sleep. Lin Sun opened his eyes. Clang! The wisp of boundless dark gray light in his palm suddenly transformed into a 3 m long spear. It was completely ancient and natural, yet it emanated a terrifying aura of its own, and it suppressed space to the point it wailed, and seemed to be on the verge of collapse. Hiss! Many gasps resounded in the surroundings. As soon as the spear appeared, a terrifying force of destruction swept out, and it caused goosebumps to arise all over their bodies while they faintly felt a piercing pain. It seemed that the spear had a life of its own, and there was a soul with peerless sharpness lying dormant in it. All the big shots in the field widened their eyes and spread out all kinds of perceptions to capture the breath diffusing from the spear, not letting go of any detail. At this time, Lin Zhong moved. His eyes were like swords, his eyebrows were full of vigor, and his momentum had climbed to the peak. In a trance, Tan Hua seemed to come back. With a long spear in his hand, he alone had the peerless demeanor of conquering mountains and rivers and looking down on the world. Boom! On the high platform, a copper-skinned puppet appeared. It was the best defensive puppet in Keystone business, which could resist a powerful blow of Tao Insight Realm. It was extremely valuable. However, when Lin Zhong pointed the tip of his spear at it from afar, the copper-skinned puppet was instantly destroyed, and turned into powder that fluttered in the air. With the breath contained in a wisp of the spear, a puppet that could resist a full blow of Tao Insight Realm was smashed. The auditorium was in an uproar, and many big shots couldn't help but be shocked. The power of this spear was simply too horrible. Luo Feng's pupils shrank, and then he snorted, "If that's all, it's just a slightly more lethal spiritual tattoo armor at best." But just a moment later, his face stiffened, and his heart twitched fiercely. On the high platform, the dark gray spear suddenly steamed out one complex and obscure spiritual formation pattern after another. There was a vague roar of the Kuei ox and a strange phenomenon of the sun and the moon rising and falling. This scene was like a miracle which stunned all the people present. At this moment, the expressions of some great figures of the older generation with profound cultivations changed slightly, because they clearly sensed a dangerous aura spreading everywhere, and it caused them to be unable to help but feel a trace of terror in their hearts. At this time, Feng Qinyu was also in a trance, and her beautiful little face was full of amazement and shock. She suddenly murmured, "Teacher, can you see how many spiritual formations are inscribed in the treasure? If I'm not mistaken, there should be 49 heaven-level spiritual formations." Madame Baohua's eyes were also full of extraordinary splendor. "The Great Way is 50, and the Heavenly Evolution is 49. One of them escaped, but all of them were obtained by a spear. This is a taboo. How did he refine it?" She couldn't keep calm, and her mind was shaken. "Teacher, what are you talking about?" Feng Qinyu was confused. At this moment, Madame Baohua seemed to be in a trance, and she didn't pay attention to Feng Qinyu. She murmured, "No wonder it attracted the thunder test. This is not tolerated by God. One of them escaped, and all of them were sealed in this spear. This is against God. But how did he do it in the end? How could he make this spear exist in the world?" Not only Madame Baohua, but also Luo Feng saw this, so his face became extremely stiff, and his pupils dilated. He still couldn't believe it. Yu Beidou, Qingjing, and old Mo could vaguely feel it, but they couldn't determine whether it was real or not, so they couldn't help feeling surprised. They were all spiritual tattooists, the leading figures in the spiritual tattoo circle. What they paid attention to were some secret methods and formation patterns of refining this spear. But for those big shots who had profound attainments in cultivation, the strange phenomenon presented by this spear made them feel an invisible sense of danger. Clang. Chapter 519. Holding the spear, Lin Zhong stood alone with his back straight. His whole body was surrounded by obscure and gray spiritual tattoo formations. If he had a peerless sharpness before, at this moment, he had a kind of palpitating aura. This was the perfect embodiment of the armor with spiritual tattoos. It was different from the Ling weapons and treasures of the world. With a spear in hand, it could transform a Xiozha's power and presence into battle armor. It could transform the Xiozha's power and presence. That was the origin of the word armor. The whole audience was silent. The eyes of the big shots became scorching, and their faces were full of amazement. Those spiritual tattooists were also shocked and couldn't calm down. There was no doubt that this was indeed a perfect armor with spiritual tattoos. The unique aura vividly explained what was called uncanny workmanship. Whoosh! A figure appeared on the high platform, holding a spiritual sword, and rushed to Lin Zhong. This was a cold-looking man in black with the cultivation of Tao Insight Realm. He was specially arranged by Keystone Business to test the power of the armor with spiritual tattoos. The spiritual sword in the man's hand was as red as fire, and its spiritual light was burning. It was a precious heaven-rank treasure, which was also made by Keystone Business. Clatter! As soon as the man appeared, the figure of the man in black flickered, and the spiritual sword in his hand suddenly turned into a rain of fire, pouring down. Every single rain of fire was formed from a strand of peerlessly fierce sword insight, and they were filled with the energy of true fire concept. Thousands of rain of fire poured down densely, covering the sky and the earth. The momentum was so great that it almost burned the void into a hornet's nest. Ma Ting! Sword principle of fire rain! A big shot exclaimed. He recognized the identity of the man in black and the name of this attack. It was a sword method famous for its aggressiveness and fierceness. But as soon as the exclamation sounded, an unbelievable scene appeared. When the fiery rain of swords that covered the sky was about to completely envelop Lin Zhong, an expanse of boundless gray divine radiance charged out, and in an instant, the rain of swords that covered the sky was completely wiped out. Like a stain on a canvas, it was easily cleaned with water, which seemed so casual and easy. Everyone was stunned. Ma Ting's strongest attack was swept away before it got close, and Lin Zhong didn't do anything from the beginning to the end. Obviously, it was the power of the armor with spiritual tattoos. Crash! Ma Ting's expression changed as he let out a roar and slashed down furiously with his sword. A sword intent that resembled a fiery dragon appeared in the sky. This attack was undoubtedly even more terrifying. It contained all of Ma Ting's strength, and it could be said to be a pinnacle attack. Many great figures of the older generation couldn't help but nod their heads in admiration. It was also at this time that Lin Zhong finally made a move. He held the long spear in his hand and lightly tapped the void. Everything came to a standstill. It was as if time had come to a standstill at this moment. The sword insight that was ferocious and fierce like a fire dragon seemed to have been grabbed by a shapeless hand and stopped there, unable to slash down. Crack! Crack! A frightening shattering sound suddenly rang out. With Lin Zhong at the center, the surrounding void collapsed inch by inch like a mirror, spreading in all directions. Everyone's eyeballs almost fell out. Even the void was collapsing. What kind of terrifying power was needed to achieve such a feat? Rumble! The void collapsed more and more violently, like waves exploding in the tide. However, the waves were all derived from the broken turbulence of the void. As expected, the strand of sword insight that was like a flame dragon was like a lone boat amidst tempestuous waves, and it was instantly and soundlessly drowned, disintegrated, and vanished into nothingness. The faces of the great figures in the field changed again. Even the terrifying existences like the Iron Blood King and the Fortune God sure couldn't help but be shocked. The destructive energy contained within this strike had simply arrived at an inconceivable level. Boom! In the end, the spiritual sword in Ma Ting's hand was also smashed and turned into a rain of light. Exclamations rang out in the field. Many people couldn't sit still and suddenly stood up. Because the turbulence of the void formed by the explosion swept the high platform and was about to drown Ma Ting and rush out of the high platform. But at this moment, the long spear in Lin Zhong's hand shook, and an invisible aura emerged. The destructive explosive power that spread out suddenly quieted down and disappeared silently. The terrible scene of destruction suddenly disappeared. This feeling was so uncomfortable that it almost made people vomit blood. At this time, Ma Ting was soaked in cold sweat and his face was pale. Although he was arranged to cooperate with the test of the spiritual tattoo armor this time, he clearly felt a fatal breath of death at that moment, which made him feel desperate and helpless. He had no strength to struggle and resist at all. It was too terrible. Everyone was shocked, including Luo Feng, Madame Baohua, and other spiritual tattooists, as well as those great figures who had reached the peak of cultivation. There was a dead silence, so quiet that even a needle falling to the ground could be heard. Clang! Lin Zhong put the armor of spiritual tattoos back into the bronze box. At the same time, Lian appeared on the high platform in time and said loudly, "This spear is called Death of Shattering. Its specific power is confidential." Although this introduction was simple, it was very powerful. Death of Shattering. Thinking of the shocking scenes that happened just now, the void that burst like a tide, and the destructive aura that made people's scalps numb, everyone had to admit that this was indeed a unique armor of spiritual tattoos. It was so unique that it was like a blade of destruction. Once it appeared, destruction would befall and everything would become death. After a short period of silence, the audience erupted into heated discussions. It was a scene of chaos. Every big shot who had witnessed the power of death of shattering couldn't stay calm at this moment. It was really rare for a armor of spiritual tattoos to show such a destructive power. They were all very sure that the power shown just now was only a small part of it. Perhaps only Lin Sun and Lin Zhong knew its real power. But even so, this treasure was peerless, at least not inferior to some of the most famous armor of spiritual tattoos in the Empire today. From now on, the Lieutenant General of the Empire has another peerless treasure. There is no doubt that the appearance of death of shattering is destined to make the world tremble just like its destructive power. Amazing, really amazing. Lin Sun, a young man, has already achieved the attainment of refining armor of spiritual tattoos. His future is limitless. All kinds of discussions broke out in the audience. Madame Baohua calmed down at this time. She sat there quietly, lost in thought. Compared with her calm face, her heart couldn't calm down at all. Unlike others, as a spiritual tattoo guru, she undoubtedly knew the uniqueness of death of shattering. It was not because of its terrifying power, but because the method of refining it was simply against the natural order. It touched the taboo but was not destroyed, and seized a trace of the power of creation. She couldn't imagine how Lin Sun did it and who taught him this kind of refining method, but she had a familiar feeling and felt a familiar aura. She was lost in thought. Sword of Apocalypse. After a while, Madame Baohua's eyes suddenly lit up. She finally remembered that the breath of death of shattering was very similar to that of Sword of Apocalypse in the Empress's hand. Teacher, Sword of Apocalypse has already been repaired by Lin Sun. Did you notice something? Feng Qinyu was curious. She felt that her teacher was a little unusual today. I see. Madame Baohua had vaguely guessed who Lin Sun's teacher was, and her expression couldn't help showing a touch of complexity. Qinyu, do you want to learn from Lin Sun? Madame Baohua suddenly asked. Feng Qinyu was stunned, her big black eyes opened wide, and she said, Teacher, you want me to learn from him? Madame Baohua answered absent-mindedly, You can think about it. Feng Qinyu was a little unhappy, biting her moist lips. Lin Sun was younger than her. If she learned from him, it would be so embarrassing. She also knew that Lin Sun was very powerful and she couldn't compare with him, but the pride in her heart made it difficult for her to bow her head to Lin Sun. There was a lot of discussion in the field, but none of the big shots left because they all knew that the press conference had just begun, and the highlight was waiting for Lin Sun's appearance. With their identity, each of them could be said to be all-powerful in the empire, like a king or a marquis. Why did they gather here this time? In addition to witnessing a newly born spiritual armor, it was more important to take this opportunity to fight for a chance. As for what the chance was, they would know later. Didn't someone say that Lin Sun was playing to the gallery? Now, I want to ask, is it Lin Sun playing to the gallery, or someone taking advantage of his seniority? Suddenly, old Mo opened his mouth, which attracted many people's attention, and reminded them of some disputes that happened just now. Sure enough, hearing this, Luo Feng's face suddenly darkened, but he kept his composure and said calmly, Only when there is doubt can it show the uniqueness and extraordinariness of this treasure. Old Mo, you are too narrow-minded. After a pause, he continued, What's more, as you all know, the most important thing in refining spiritual armor is luck. Lin Sun succeeded this time, but it doesn't mean that he will be successful in refining more similar treasures in the future. These words didn't reveal anything, but if one listened carefully, one could hear that Luo Feng clearly believed that Lin Sun was able to refine the shattering death because of luck, and he probably wouldn't be so lucky in the future. However, what Luo Feng said was true, because in the past years, there were indeed many similar examples. The reason was that the failure rate of refining spirit rune armors was too high. Even spirit rune grandmaster level characters had failed frequently. Otherwise, armors with spiritual tattoos wouldn't be so rare and precious as they were now. But at this moment, Luo Feng's words obviously had a different meaning, which could be understood by anyone who was not a fool. Old Mo's face also darkened. In his view, Luo Feng's words were too vicious, and he was obviously cursing Lin Sun. But before Old Mo opened his mouth to refute, a calm and indifferent voice sounded. So, Master Luo Feng is sure that it will be difficult for me to successfully refine spiritual armor in the future? Chapter 520. Dressed in moon-white clothes, Lin Sun stood tall and straight. His long black hair was tied behind his head at will, revealing a delicate and warm face with clear and deep eyes. When Lin Sun appeared on the high platform, all the people present focused their eyes on him in an instant. When they saw Lin Sun with their own eyes, many people still couldn't believe it. He was too young. He was like a boy next door with a graceful bearing. At his age, most people were still working hard to cultivate and improve themselves, and they were like newborn calves. Even though they were full of youthful energy, they still needed time to make a name for themselves. But Lin Sun was different. His achievements had already surpassed his peers and shocked the whole world. Who could imagine that such a young man had already set foot on the transcendent realm of spiritual tattoos and surpassed many spiritual tattooists of the older generation? Who could imagine that this young man rose like a comet and had never been knocked down after so many trials and tribulations? What was a talent? That was it. Detached from the world, talented and different from the world. At this moment, the big shots present couldn't help but think what kind of amazing brilliance such a talented young man could show in the future if he was given enough time to rise up. Only Luo Feng's eyebrows showed a touch of gloom. Lin Sun's words when he just appeared seemed a little impolite. Haha, what I said is the truth. Since ancient times, no spiritual tattooist can guarantee that he will succeed when refining the armor with spiritual tattoos. My young friend, you are so amazing that I appreciate your talent. But after all, you are still too young, and it's understandable that you don't know some things about refining the armor with spiritual tattoos. Luo Feng chuckled and said lightly, showing the demeanor of a spiritual tattooist. But the second half of the sentence was obviously a warning to Lin Sun. The implication was that Lin Sun was really amazing, but he was still too young and needed to learn a lot. On the high platform, Lin Sun smiled brightly, showing his snow-white teeth. I remember you just said that old Mo was not qualified for you to explain anything. Now I also want to say that although I am young, I have refined the armor with spiritual tattoos. You want to give me some advice? Do you think you are qualified? All the people in the auditorium couldn't help but look strange. They didn't expect that Lin Sun would quarrel with Luo Feng as soon as he appeared. Who was Luo Feng? He was the only remaining Grandmaster of Spiritual Tattoos in the Academy of Spiritual Implements of the Empire and was highly respected by all spiritual tattooists in the world. It was really surprising that Lin Sun was so impolite and confronted him directly. But after thinking about it, everyone felt relieved. Now in the Forbidden City, who didn't know that Lin Sun was a reckless young man who didn't know what fear was? Even Qi family, Zhou family, Qin family and the imperial royal family dared not to put them in his eyes. Naturally, he would not be afraid of Luo Feng. Luo Feng's face sunk. Being questioned by a junior in front of everyone, and with such harsh words, was undoubtedly challenging his authority and dignity. Lin Sun is young and full of vigor. It's understandable for him to be arrogant. But if he thinks he can be lawless and despise the world just because he has refined a piece of armor with spiritual tattoos, then he's making a big mistake. Luo Feng said seriously, his aura was terrifying. Luo Feng, what do you mean by that? When did Lin Sun become so lawless? Don't falsely accuse him. It's you who took advantage of your seniority first. What? Lin Sun's rebuttal made you angry? Old Mo stood up and scolded angrily. He knew very well that words could sometimes destroy a person. Luo Feng's status in the spiritual tattoos circle of the empire was extremely high. Once his words were spread out today, it would inevitably cause a lot of rumors and make many spiritual tattooists who didn't know the truth disgusted with Lin Sun. In that case, it would undoubtedly be a serious blow to Lin Sun's reputation. Old Mo, pay attention to your identity. You are still working in the Academy of Spiritual Implements of the Empire. Do you really think I dare not punish you for offending your superiors? Luo Feng snorted coldly and looked more and more dignified. He was really annoyed. Today, all the people present were famous big shots, but he was repeatedly provoked by Lin Sun and Old Mo, which made him a little embarrassed. Threaten me? Old Mo's face was cloudy. At this time, Lin Sun suddenly laughed and said, I almost forgot it if you didn't remind me. But it's not too late now. Now, I officially invite Old Mo to join Heart-Cleansing Peak of Lin family. He looked solemn and serious. This was what he had wanted to do for a long time. Now that Luo Feng dared to threaten Old Mo with this, Lin Sun would not be polite. As soon as Lin Sun's words came out, the whole audience was in an uproar. It was just a press conference, but now it involved a grudge with Old Mo, which was unexpected to everyone. Old Mo's lips trembled with excitement at the moment. He had already felt that the reason why Lin Sun confronted Luo Feng as soon as he appeared was obviously to help him. What a joke! Young man, you are too arrogant. How can you take away a spiritual tattooist from the Academy of Spiritual Implements of the Empire? Luo Feng laughed. A spiritual tattooist like Old Mo, who can refine a new Ziying battleship, is of great importance to the Empire. I believe that no one will allow Old Mo to leave. His words were decisive and he didn't give Lin Sun a chance at all. Everyone nodded secretly. The Academy of Spiritual Implements of the Empire was an extremely important place in the Empire, directly under the control of the Imperial Royal Family and the military. It was really difficult for Lin Sun to take Old Mo away. But Lin Sun said coldly, You are wrong. The new Ziying battleship was developed by Old Mo and me. In those days, Old Mo was forcibly taken away by you instead of serving you willingly. If Old Mo didn't protect me with all his strength at that time, I'm afraid that I would have been taken away by you. It's merciful of me not to settle accounts with you today. As soon as Lin Sun's words came out, all the people present were shocked. They didn't expect that the new Ziying battleship, which was now famous in the Empire, should be credited to Lin Sun. What was more surprising was that the Academy of Spiritual Implements of the Empire had once taken action against Lin Sun and Old Mo. If this was true, it would be too shocking. For a moment, the whole audience was silent, and all the big shots had different expressions. A mouthful of nonsense! Luo Feng shouted angrily and his hair stood on end. Whether it is true or not, you know it best. I don't want to argue with you. I will ask for a fair explanation later. Lin Sun looked calm, but his black eyes were surging with cold light. This matter had been suppressed in his heart for many years. Now that he had fallen out with Old Mo, he would not be polite anymore. In order to repay Old Mo's protection in those days, Lin Sun had to do this. Are you challenging the Academy of Spiritual Implements of the Empire? Luo Feng looked cold and his eyes were full of anger. The Academy of Spiritual Implements of the Empire serves the Empire, not your own territory. You are not qualified to represent the Academy of Spiritual Implements of the Empire at all. Lin Sun looked calmer and calmer. I just want to find out the murderer hiding in the dark and give justice to Old Mo. Ridiculous, it's really ridiculous. Luo Feng stood up angrily. You are just a junior. Do you really think you can take Old Mo away from the Academy of Spiritual Implements of the Empire in this way? The situation had obviously become tense and was about to be out of control. Brother Luo, don't talk so much. What happened in those days only involved you, Old Mo and me. Don't let others laugh at you. Suddenly, Madame Bao Hua sighed softly, and a touch of sadness appeared on her elegant face. Everyone was shocked again, and then they realized that there was a hidden story behind this confrontation that others could not know. Yes, it was caused by the three of us. Lin Sun, don't interfere. Let me solve it by myself. I have been a good-for-nothing for half of my life. If I don't settle this score by myself, I won't rest in peace even if I die. Old Mo gritted his teeth and said resolutely. He looked at Lin Sun with gratitude and a touch of pleading in his eyes, which made Lin Sun's heart tremble. He was stunned, and finally sighed softly and said no more. Humph! Luo Feng's face changed for a long time. Then he gave a cold snort and left in a huff. Everyone looked at each other. No one had expected that the only Grand Master of Spiritual Tattoos of the Empire of the Academy of Spiritual Implements should be driven away by anger today. What kind of grievances existed between him, Old Mo and Madame Bao Hua? No one knew. Even Lin Sun didn't know much about it. But there was no doubt that because of Lin Sun's involvement today, the grievances between them were picked up again. It would not take long for them to come to an end. Old Mo, no matter what, as long as you need help, I will always stand by your side. I'd like to see what Luo Feng dares to do to me. Lin Sun transmitted his voice to Old Mo, and the latter's expression became complicated. He was grateful and sighed at the same time. This little episode soon passed. Although the atmosphere at this time was not as lively as before, when Lin Sun personally announced that anyone who could provide the solution to the Devil's Calamity powder would refine a suit of spiritual tattoo for him, the scene suddenly became sensational again. In fact, many people present had heard this news. But now that Lin Sun personally confirmed it, they finally dared to confirm that Lin Sun was not joking. Devil's Calamity powder. Devil's Calamity powder was a very rare poison, vicious and mysterious. It was said that it was spread from the dark alien tribe. Once poisoned, one's cultivation would be confined, as if he was disabled, and he would have to suffer the pain of heart demons all the time. All the bigwigs present began to think about it and secretly decided that, after the end of this conference, they would try their best to search for the antidote to Devil's Calamity powder. Of course, when refining a piece of spiritual tattoo armor, I need to prepare the spiritual materials by myself, which I can't afford. After refining the shattering sorrow, I'm really poor now. Lin Sun shrugged. There was a burst of friendly laughter in the hall. Before long, Lin Sun walked down the high platform and handed over the matter to Lian. Everyone, Keystone Business has obtained the consent of Master Lin Sun. In order to seek a benefit for all of you, we will auction a special place at this auspicious time. As soon as Lian opened his mouth, he immediately attracted the attention of the audience. The friend who finally gets the place will have the opportunity to refine a piece of spiritual tattoo armor for him by Master Lin Sun himself. The audience was completely boiling, and many bigwigs were refreshed. The opportunity they had been looking forward to finally came. Yes, Lin Sun's quota for refining weapons was like a lucky chance for them. Chapter 521. Everyone, because this quota involves a lot of things, there is one thing that must be said in advance. On the high platform, Lian looked solemn. Those who are related to Qi family, Zhou family and Qin family are not allowed to participate in the auction. The whole audience suddenly became quiet. The meaning of this requirement was too obvious. It was undoubtedly telling the world clearly that Lin Sun would never provide any help for the three top aristocratic families. Similarly, after the auction, if Keystone Business finds out that this quota has fallen into the hands of those who are related to Qi family, Zhou family and Qin family, we have the right to take it back. Li An's words also showed the attitude of Keystone Business, which caused another commotion among the big shots in the field. Obviously, Keystone Business had decided to stand behind Lin Sun, and they didn't hesitate to offend the three aristocratic families. This made many people secretly sigh that Lin Sun was indeed different from before. His rise had begun to make giants like Keystone Business express their support publicly. This was a kind of change. Before long, the auction began. The base price was 30,000 gold coins, which was the price of a brand new Zing battleship. It was amazing. However, after seeing the uniqueness of the Broken Sorrow, people just felt that it was reasonable. 50,000! Someone shouted. The price was raised to 50,000 for the first time, which made many people take a breath of cold air. The value of the imperial gold coins was extremely high. For a big force, 50,000 gold coins was not a small number. Just for a quota of refining armors with spiritual tattoos, there was such a crazy bidding, which made some big shots who were ready to take action a little hesitant. 60,000. It was Blood King Ningbugue who made the bid, which made Yi Qingtian frown and whisper, "Old man, what are you doing?" Ningbugue's rough and fierce look showed a hint of cunning, and then he became expressionless and said, "Old Yi, you know nothing. I'm helping Lin Sun earn more gold coins. There are many fat sheep here. It would be a pity if I don't take this opportunity to blackmail them." Yi Qingtian smiled and said, "Then I'll join in the fun." However, before Yi Qingtian could make a bid, someone made a sky-high bid, 100,000 gold coins. The scene went silent while the expressions of all the great figures sank, and they frowned without end. Perhaps 100,000 gold coins wasn't too much to many of them, but if it was merely for the sake of bidding for a single position, then it seemed to be rather shocking. After all, Lin Sun was not the only one who could refine armors with spiritual tattoos. A portion of the great figures immediately withdrew themselves from the bidding because they discerned that the great figure that made the bid of 100,000 was surprisingly from one of the 7 high-level clans, the Xie clan. There was no doubt that the following auction would be a stage for these colossi that stood at the apex of the world to compete, and the other forces that were slightly weaker would be unable to interfere at all. Ningbugue and Yi Qingtian looked at each other and laughed together. They originally wanted to be the actors, but it was obvious that they were no longer needed due to the rapid changes in the situation. 110,000, 130,000, 150,000. As expected, in the following auction, almost all those who made bids were powerful forces, such as the Xie clan, the Hua clan, the Song clan, the royal forces of the empire, the military department of the empire, and the headquarters of the commune of spiritual tattooists. 200,000. The great figure of the Hua clan was a little annoyed and directly made a jaw-dropping bid, which silenced the surrounding people. The price was really terrifying. 300,000. Suddenly, a gentle voice sounded. Wow, the scene was stirred up. For a single position, this was a shocking number, even enough to buy a large imperial battleship. What surprised people the most was that it was Madame Baohua from the Green Deer Academy who made the bid. But after thinking about it, they understood that as a senior spiritual tattooist, Madame Baohua didn't lack money at all. As the oldest saying in the empire said, what flowed between the fingers of a spiritual tattooist was endless golden sand. When one's status and cultivation reach a certain level, money in the secular sense has become worthless. No matter how much money you have, can you exchange it for a great inheritance? Can you exchange it for a chance to live a long life? No. Someone sighed with emotion, which aroused many echoes. So, I'm determined to get this position. Suddenly, a burst of laughter sounded in the field, and a bid was announced, 500,000. Sea King, it's the Sea King. Hey, this is going to be a good show. Even the great figures of the imperial family can't sit still. There was a lot of whispers in the field. The Sea King, Zhao Jiuxiao, was a legendary figure. In front of him, even big shots like Ningbugue and Fortune Godshire had to be polite, not because of fear, but out of respect. Madame Baohua thought for a while and finally shook her head, withdrawing from the auction. 500,000 was a crazy number. No matter how rich she was, she had to weigh whether it was worth it or not. 600,000. The representative of the Hua family bit the bullet, gnashed his teeth, and gave a more terrifying number. he had already thrown caution to the wind. Among the 7 aristocratic families, only the Hua family was relatively short of spiritual tattoos. They did not want to miss this opportunity. Even if there was a competition from the imperial family like Zhao Jiuxiao, they would not give in. 700,000. However, what made the representative of the Hua family feel heavy was that the price had already been reported to such a degree. Other than King Comingxi, there was actually someone else involved. It was the Xie family. Sorry, our 9th young master is about to go to the ancient desolation realm for cultivation and urgently needs a suitable armors with spiritual tattoos. We are also determined to get this position. The big shot of the Xie family said with a smile. The 9th young master of the Xie family was naturally young Sword King, Shai Yutong. Haha, it seems that everyone has the same purpose. My nephew is also going to the ancient desolation realm. As an elder, I should give him a suitable treasure. Zhao Jiuxiao laughed out loud and made another bid of 800,000. This made many people unable to calm down. They realized that today's auction had obviously become fierce and bloody. It was the first time for many big shots to see such a crazy scene. It was too shocking. 900,000. The representative of the Hua family gnashed his teeth. 1 million. The representative of the Xie family was resolute. 1,100,000. Zhao Jiuxiao was even more ruthless. Crazy. Hearing the shocking figures appear one after another, all the big shots present were dumbfounded. They were people who did not lack money, but they had never seen anyone fight so fiercely just for a spot. In the end, the position was bought by the Sea King at a sky-high price of 1,600,000. When the result was known, the whole audience fell into a dead silence. Even Lian on the high platform was stunned and did not come to his senses. On this day, the news that Lin Sun's position was sold at a sky-high price of 1,600,000 became the headline of the Forbidden City again. No matter where it was, there was an overwhelming discussion about the death of shattering. Everyone was discussing what kind of magic this armor with spiritual tattoos had, which had survived the Thunder Tribulation, and why so many big shots were willing to bid for a position at all costs. The true power of the death of shattering was kept a secret and had not been shown. But all the bigwigs at the conference agreed that it was a unique treasure. It was definitely more powerful than other armors with spiritual tattoos that existed in the world. This made people more and more curious. Not to mention the death of shattering, just the position won by Zhao Jiuxiao at a sky-high price of 1,600,000 gold coins. Was it worth it? Worth it. It was said that this was the evaluation of Madame Bao Hua of Green Deer School. It was a simple word, but it had a shocking persuasive power. With the help of this conference, Lin Sun became the only grandmaster of spiritual tattoos in the young generation that attracted the attention of the whole world. That's right. A spiritual tattoo master who could refine a suit of spiritual tattoos by himself could have the title of guru justifiably without the need for certification. And his masterpiece, Death of Shattering, also became another amazing treasure of the empire, which made countless spiritual tattooists crazy. Lin Sun didn't know about this. At the beginning of the auction, he and Lin Zhong had left through a secret passage under the arrangement of Keystone business. Therefore, he didn't see the fierce auction with his own eyes, so he didn't know that he got 1,600,000 gold coins just for a position. At this time, Lin Sun was sitting in the chariot, accompanied by Lin Zhong, heading for Heart Cleansing Peak. He hadn't returned to Heart Cleansing Peak for some time. There were some things he needed to discuss with Vulture. Zhu Laosan has gone to the Tower of Developing Wheel in the depths of the Imperial Palace to cultivate. If there is no mistake, it should not take long for him to break through the realm. At this conference, the news of finding the antidote of Devil's Tribulation powder was also announced. I believe that as long as the antidote can be obtained, Vulture's pain can be solved and his original strength can be regained. Lin Sun was thinking about things all the way, frowning. Lin Zhong looked at the handsome outline of the young boy beside him, and suddenly felt pity for him. His young master was only 16 years old. Outsiders only saw his beautiful side. Who knew how much pressure and danger he had suffered behind the beautiful side? Boom! Suddenly, a terrible battle wave came from a distance, awakening Lin Sun and Lin Zhong, who were meditating in the chariot. What happened? Lin Zhong asked. There are some blind people ambushing there. Don't worry. Keystone Business has sent enough forces to ensure your safety to Heart-Cleansing Peak. The chariot was driven by a gray-haired old man from Keystone Business. He was arranged by Fortune Godshire to escort Lin Sun and Lin Zhong all the way. It seems that in order to kill me, they have lost their composure. Chapter 522. At some point, a drizzle had begun to fall from the sky. It was hazy and lingering, and the air was moist. A chariot carrying Lin Sun and Lin Zhong drove along the cobweb-like street at a moderate speed. Along the way, 1 or 2 screams could be heard from time to time, and the sound of fighting like thunder could be heard. But in merely a short moment, it returned to silence as if nothing had happened. In the chariot, Lin Sun looked calm. He didn't need to guess at all. He knew that the enemies ambushing along the road must come from Qi family, Zhou family or Qin family. Or it might be the 3 forces joining hands. It was easy to guess that they could ambush there in advance, because everyone knew that Lin Sun would hold a press conference in Keystone Business today. In this case, as long as they ambushed on the road, they could wait for Lin Sun to show up sooner or later. But Lin Sun still didn't expect that they were so impatient. Obviously, after realizing that his rising momentum was too fast, they had already perceived the threat and could not tolerate him to continue to grow. Fortunately, Keystone Business has arranged a lot of manpower this time. Otherwise, there may be an unpredictable fierce battle along the way. Lin Sun lifted the curtain of the chariot and looked into the distance. He saw a scarlet flower blooming in the void far away. It was scarlet and beautiful. Lin Zhong reminded Lin Sun, "Young master, don't take it lightly. Since they dare to take action, they must have made full preparation." Lin Sun nodded and said, "Grandad Zhong, in the past history of the empire, have there been any upper-class aristocratic families being destroyed?" Lin Zhong shook his head, "Almost none." Immediately, he smiled bitterly. "Young master, do you forget that our Lin family was also one of the upper-class aristocratic families 500 years ago, but now?" Lin Sun was stunned and lost in thought. The chariot went forward smoothly, but both Lin Sun and Lin Zhong knew that bloody battles were taking place in places they couldn't see. Squeak! Suddenly, the chariot stopped, and the wheels rubbed against the ground violently, making a painful sound. Almost at the same time, the old man driving the chariot shouted in a low voice, "Be careful!" Boom! A terrible force came, producing a destructive force. Suddenly, the chariot seemed to be in a storm and was about to be squeezed to pieces. Without any hesitation, Lin Sun and Lin Zhong rushed out. At the same time, the treasure carriage that was covered in dense spiritual inscriptions suddenly exploded, turning into fragments that flew everywhere. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes. This chariot was personally arranged by Fortune Godshire of Keystone House, which could block the attack of Tao Insight Realm. But now it was easily destroyed. It was conceivable that the enemy must have the power of Reincarnation Development Realm. Sure enough, an intense battle was occurring in the distance. The old man that controlled the treasured carriage was in battle with a figure that was completely enveloped in a black robe. This was a battle between cultivators at the Reincarnation Developing Realm. The methods and secret techniques they used drew upon the power of the great path of heaven and earth. It was terrifying beyond measure. This made Lin Sun's heart sink. He realized that even if Keystone Business had arranged enough power, it still didn't expect that the enemy would send such a terrible force to kill him. A warrior of the Reincarnation Development Realm. Such an existence could be said to be a stabilizing force even amongst the low-level clans, and they wouldn't make a move easily. Whoosh! Suddenly, a dazzling sword light flashed across the void and came to Lin Sun. At that moment, an indescribable sense of horror and danger surged in Lin Sun's heart, making his skin tingle and his pupils shrink. Another cultivator at the reincarnation developing realm. There was more than one great practitioner at the reincarnation developing realm among the enemies who came to attack this time. "You're courting death!" Lin Zhong shouted and rushed to the sky. With a clang, the death of shattering appeared. The vast and gray air gushed out and covered Lin Zhong's whole body. Boom! The battle broke out. At this time, Lin Sun finally saw clearly that the owner of the dazzling sword light was also a practitioner covered in a black robe, whose appearance couldn't be seen at all. This was the Forbidden City, the capital of the empire. Although this area belonged to the Edge and was quite deserted, it was still within the scope of the Forbidden City. But the enemy dared to ambush along the way, and even sent a great practitioner at the reincarnation developing realm, which could only prove that they would do anything to kill Lin Sun. If there is another great practitioner at the reincarnation developing realm, I will be in trouble today. Lin Sun stood there with a dignified look on his handsome face. As if to confirm Lin Sun's guess, this unfortunate thing was guessed correctly. Lin Sun only felt dizzy in front of his eyes, and then 4 light pillars fell from the sky. In an instant, Lin Sun's vision changed, and he appeared in a dreamland. It was a vast expanse of whiteness, surrounded by 4 stone pillars that rose to the sky and guarded the 4 poles. The stone pillar was branded with dense and ancient patterns, and it emanated a terrifying aura of restriction. Whoosh! Lin Sun tried to break out with ice drake steps, but no matter how he moved and flashed, he couldn't get out of the blockade of the 4 stone pillars. In other words, this dreamland was like a cage, trapping Lin Sun in it. "Time is precious. Little guy, it's time for us to talk." Suddenly, a figure emerged, also in a black robe, covering his whole body with wisps of black light. It was impossible to see his face clearly. Sure enough, another practitioner at the reincarnation developing realm. Lin Sun's heart was heavy, and he realized that the real fatal danger was coming. Don't take any chances. Under the confinement of the 4 symbols coiling dragon pillars, even a king of the life and death realm can't do anything to you within 15 minutes. The voice of the black-robed man was old, with a sense of indifference and coldness. "What do you want to talk about?" Lin Sun completely calmed down at this moment, knowing that the black-robed man didn't intend to attack him immediately. "It's very simple. Release the power of your soul, and let me add a layer of prohibition to your soul. I can not only guarantee that you will live, but also live a good life." The black-robed man put his hands behind his back. He was tall and straight, surrounded by a terrible black light, like a king coming out of hell, frightening people's souls. "You want to control me?" Lin Sun frowned. "This is the only way for you to survive. Otherwise, do you think I will choose to talk to you at this time instead of killing you immediately?" The black-robed man let out a chuckle. He seemed very conceited, with an absolute control over the situation, and didn't worry about what tricks Lin Sun could play at this moment. "What if I don't agree?" Lin Sun looked indifferent, with a cold light surging in his black eyes. "Don't try to stall for time. Today you can only agree." As he spoke, the black-robed man's figure disappeared out of thin air. The next moment, he appeared in front of Lin Sun, grabbed Lin Sun's neck, and lifted him up. The speed was so fast that it was like teleportation, like a ghost. It vividly demonstrated the power of the reincarnation developing realm, leaving Lin Sun no chance to struggle or resist. "As long as I use a little force, your life will be ended in an instant. Little guy, face the reality. Even if you have great talent, you haven't grown up yet. It's easier for me to kill you now than killing a chicken or a dog." The black-robed man spoke unhurriedly. He didn't mean to humiliate Lin Sun, but inadvertently showed a condescending attitude. Indeed, in the eyes of a great practitioner of the reincarnation developing realm, a young man of the sea spirit realm was indeed too small and unbearable. However, Lin Sun looked extremely calm at this moment. Even if his throat was grabbed and he was suffocating, he still looked extremely calm. Do you know the consequences of doing this? Crack. As soon as the voice fell, the black-robed man broke the bones of Lin Sun's left arm. Lin Sun let out a muffled groan in pain. His face turned pale and his forehead was soaked with cold sweat. There was no doubt that the black-robed man was absolutely ruthless. His threat was also the most direct. He wanted to destroy and force Lin Sun to yield by the most ruthless means. Little guy, you are indeed too young. Today, I dare to attack you here, because I have already considered all the consequences. The black-robed man chuckled. From Lin Sun's point of view, he could only see his white teeth, which looked extremely terrifying. It seems that it's useless for me to say anything today. Either die or yield, right? Lin Sun endured the pain of breaking his arm and squeezed out a smile at the corner of his mouth. Yes, you are a smart boy. I believe you will make a choice that is good for both you and me. The black-robed man nodded. Pooh! Suddenly, Lin Sun opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of saliva. With a smack, the saliva fell on the black-robed man's lower jaw, leaving a line of crystal liquid on his skin. Old guy, you are dreaming. Lin Sun said word by word with a bright smile. The black-robed man was silent, which could be clearly felt that he had been irritated by the sudden spit. Perhaps, since he'd started cultivating until now, he'd never imagined that he would one day be spat on by someone, and this caused him to be utterly unable to restrain the rage in his heart. A young man who could only sit and wait for death actually dared to be so audacious and humiliate him in such a despicable way. Even if a deity came, he would be completely enraged. Bang! The next moment, Lin Sun was smashed on the ground. All his bones were almost broken. He couldn't help but let out another muffled groan. Then, the black-robed man smiled coldly. Don't worry. I still have a lot of time to torture you before you yield. As he said, he stamped on Lin Sun's left hand. With a burst of cracking sounds, Lin Sun's whole left hand was crushed, and dark red blood gurgled out. Hearing the sound of broken bones and bursting blood, the black-robed man let out a satisfied groan. Then he raised his foot and stamped on Lin Sun's right hand. Lin Sun rolled on the ground and dodged to one side. The black-robed man laughed strangely. Look, it's like a maggot struggling and rolling on the ground. What a pity! If I don't vent my inner anger today, I won't stop. As he said, he stamped on Lin Sun again. He didn't use his hands, but his feet to trample Lin Sun to the ground to carry out extreme humiliation and torture. Old guy, do you really think I dare not commit suicide? Lin Sun suddenly sat up and roared. The black-robed man was stunned. At this moment, he suddenly saw a black light shooting out of Lin Sun's hand. The black-robed man reached out his hand casually and caught the black light in his hand. Ho-ho, do you still want to make a sneak attack at this time? Kid, your bones are really hard, but I hope a stubborn young man like you will feel satisfied when I torture you. The black-robed man laughed and turned over his palm. Seeing that it was just a group of insects as small as rice grains, he laughed more happily. Insects? Haha, do you think you can turn the situation around with these insects? The black-robed man said sarcastically. But Lin Sun stopped smiling and nodded seriously. Definitely. The black-robed man was stunned. At this moment, the insects in his palm seemed to wake up from a deep sleep and suddenly burrowed into the flesh of his palm. The black-robed man was shocked. His years of battle experience made him keenly aware of an extreme danger, and his face changed abruptly. He madly urged his power to force these insects out. But to his surprise, he couldn't do this with his cultivation of reincarnation developing realm, which was enough to break mountains and split seas. The swarm of insects was like nothingness. Obviously, they were not real. They could penetrate everything and couldn't be stopped or confined at all. Oh no! The black-robed man's heart shook violently, and he felt an indescribable fear. What kind of insects were these? Why were they so mysterious? Before he could figure it out, he felt a sudden pain in his sea of consciousness, as if it was torn by a bolt of lightning. He couldn't help but shake and let out a shrill scream. The most terrible thing was that the pain didn't end. The insects, like sharks smelling blood, madly rushed into his sea of consciousness, constantly gnawing and tearing his divine soul. The divine soul of reincarnation developing realm was so powerful, but in the face of this kind of attack, he couldn't resist at all. No, no, no. The black-robed man screamed madly, holding his head with both hands and tearing it madly. He seemed to be in extreme pain, and his body was twitching violently as if he had epilepsy. In the distance, Lin Sun couldn't help but be horrified. Those were spirit-eating insects, which he obtained from the Blood Desert Forbidden area in the ancient spirit world. Later, he brought them back and had sealed and stored them in his body. But even he didn't expect that the power of the spirit-eating insects was so horrible that even a practitioner of reincarnation developing realm couldn't resist them. Chapter 523. Damn it! I'm going to kill you! The black-robed man roared. His 7 apertures were bleeding, and his body was convulsing because of the severe pain. He looked like a mad demon. He pounced on Lin Sun. Obviously, he wanted to take Lin Sun down with him before he died. Even if the spirit of a reincarnation developing realm was seriously injured, once he went mad, he would still be extremely terrifying. Boom! The dark light was monstrous and exploded the void. The power of the Great Way contained was like the wrath of heaven, with an aura that could destroy heaven and earth. Lin Sun naturally could not sit still and wait for death. He had already run ice dragon steps with all his strength and escaped to the distance. At this time, he was surrounded by blazing light cyan light, like a divine rainbow around his body, ethereal like an illusory light. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In this area, Lin Sun's flickering shadows were everywhere, which was a manifestation of extreme speed. Ice dragon steps could allow one to travel in the 9th heaven, or hide in a tiny speck of dust. This was not an exaggeration. Just like now, although this illusion was imprisoned by the 4 image-coiling dragon pillars and could not escape, it was about to be completely submerged by the black-robed man's attack. But Lin Sun could always seize a narrow gap and escape. If not, he would have been killed in an instant. After all, this was the power of the reincarnation developing realm, which was a great realm higher than the Tao Insight realm. The destructive power released was not something that the sea spirit realm could resist. Fortunately, the black-robed man's soul had been badly damaged, and his consciousness had collapsed, which made his attacks disorderly, which gave Lin a chance to dodge. "Little bastard, come out!" The black-robed man let out a beast-like roar. Like a crazed demon god, he rampaged through the area. Although he was not hit by the terrifying power of the Great Way, Lin Sun still felt a chill in his heart, as if he was dancing on the tip of a knife. It was too terrifying. Even if Lin Sun had the power to go against the natural order in the sea spirit realm, and could even kill the Tao Insight realm, he still felt a suffocating pressure when facing the power of the reincarnation developing realm. This was because of the huge gap in realm and strength. Lin Sun suspected that even if he mastered the shattering death, he could not be a match for the black-robed man. Boom! Soon, Lin Sun had no time to think too much. The black-robed man's attacks were getting crazier and more terrifying, which made him more stressed. There were many times when he was struck by the strong winds while dodging, and it simply felt as if he was struck by lightning. The tendons and bones in his entire body almost broke, and his vital energy and blood roiled in disorder. There was no doubt that this was definitely the biggest crisis Lin Sun had encountered so far in his cultivation. The most terrible thing was that this area was completely blocked like an illusion. The outside world couldn't get in, and the inside world couldn't get out, so Lin Sun could only dodge with all his strength. It felt as if he was walking on the road to death, and if he made the slightest mistake, he might die on the spot. Lin Sun, do you know who am I? You can't kill me, you're killing your own family. This is treason. The black-robed man screamed crazily. His voice had already become hoarse, and his black robe was torn and messy, vaguely revealing an old, twisted, and blood-stained face. Great rebel, you motherf asterisk cur. Old bastard, you'd better close your eyes and reincarnate as soon as possible. Lin Sun sneered. Ah. The black-robed man seemed to be in more pain. He suddenly knelt on the ground, held his head with his hands, and let out a shrill roar. His body twitched constantly, and it was obvious that he couldn't bear it any longer. But Lin Sun didn't dare to be careless. Without any reservation, he used all his strength on the ice drake step. The counterattack of a reincarnation developing realm expert before death was undoubtedly the most terrifying. Lin Sun didn't want to be dragged down by the black-robed man at the last moment. Suddenly, the black-robed man raised his head, and a pair of bloodshot eyes stared at Lin Sun like a fierce beast, exuding endless resentment and unwillingness. I hate you. I can't wait to kill you, unfilial descendant. The voice was like a curse, enunciated word by word, full of resentment and unrelieved regret. In the end, the black-robed man plopped down on the ground, and the violent and crazy breath all over his body disappeared, becoming deathly still. Lin Sun stood in the distance, still vigilant. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Before long, black lights suddenly rushed out of the black-robed man's head. They were spirit-eating insects. What made Lin Sun most speechless was that these insects rushed towards him as soon as they rushed out. What a group of untamed beasts! Lin Sun cursed in his heart, but he didn't dodge. He took a deep breath, abandoned distractions, ran meditating magic with all his strength, and visualized the star circulation. A moment later, these spirit-eating insects that rushed into the sea of consciousness were suppressed by meditating magic like last time and fell into silence. But different from last time, Lin Sun was keenly aware that these 16 spirit-eating insects were bigger than before. Their bodies were like illusory black light spots, with a kind of chilling aura that made people's heart palpitate. Can they transform and grow by themselves after devouring the power of the soul? Lin Sun thought. He carefully sealed these terrible insects born in ancient times. This time, he was able to avert the danger, thanks to the great contribution of the spirit-eating insects. They could be used as a trump card. Even a great practitioner of reincarnation development realm couldn't resist them. It could be imagined how mysterious and terrible the spirit-eating insects were. Lin Sun came to the black-robed man's corpse and pulled off the black cloth that covered his face. Then he saw clearly that this was an old man with silver hair and beard. But his hair was unkempt, and his cheeks were twisted, livid, and ferocious. Even in death, there was still a touch of irresolvable resentment and unwillingness on his face. Whoosh! Seeing this, Lin Sun was completely relieved, and couldn't help kicking on the black-robed man's cheek again, as if to vent his anger. He did have a kind of unspeakable anger and hatred. This time, his life was hanging by a thread, and he almost died. How could Lin Sun not hate? Just like at this moment, his left arm was broken, and the bones of his left hand were broken and badly mutilated. All these were caused by the black-robed man. Buzz! The 4 stone pillars in this illusion suddenly fluctuated and began to become dim and blurred. Obviously, without the black-robed man's control, the so-called 4 image-coiling dragon pillars also began to lose power. In the end, along with a deafening rumble, the illusory realm exploded into pieces, and it transformed into a rain of light that vanished. On the other hand, the 4 stone pillars transformed into 4 copper mirrors that fell to the ground and emitted clanking sound. Lin Sun waved his sleeves and put away the 4 bronze mirrors. Every single copper mirror was only 9 inches long. It seemed to be made of iron, yet it wasn't. It seemed to be made of jade, yet it wasn't jade. It was extremely heavy, at least 500 kilograms. Their surface was branded with 4 pictures of ancient divine beasts. There was a green dragon roaming in the Milky Way, roaring with its head held high, a vermilion bird spreading its wings and flying in the sky, swallowing the sea of fire and purgatory, a black tortoise with the head of a dragon, the body of a turtle and the tail of a snake, sitting at the top of the sky, overlooking the universe, a white tiger trampling on mountains of corpses and seas of blood, slaughtering gods and demons, roaring in the world. These 4 pictures represented the 4-image mighty force, mysterious and unpredictable. Around each picture was branded with strange ancient patterns, reflecting ancient scenes such as the longitude and latitude of the earth, the sun, the moon, the stars, flowers, birds, insects, and fish. 4-image coiling dragon pillars. This was a group of secret treasures. At a glance, it could be seen that this group of treasures must have existed for countless years. Many places were mottled and blurred, with a heavy aura of vicissitude. Even a life-death realm king can't break it in 15 minutes. This is a group of great treasures. Lin soon put them away without hesitation. He decided to find time to study and nurture them. Maybe they could be used as a treasure for self-defense. At the same time, he finally saw the scene outside. The battle outside was still going on fiercely. The old man driving the chariot restrained a black-robed man. On the other side, Lin Zhong was also fighting with another black-robed man with the broken sorrow. However, when they noticed that the 4-image coiling dragon pillars had disappeared, but Lin Sun was still alive, the 2 black-robed men were shocked. Mission failed. Let's go. Retreat. Without any hesitation, the 2 black-robed men decisively chose to escape. Their figures flickered and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Obviously, they had realized that it was difficult to have a chance to kill Lin Sun today, so they chose to retreat without hesitation. The old man driving the chariot and Lin Zhong didn't chase after them. They were worried about Lin Sun's safety and were afraid that he would be lured away. Young master, it's great that you are still alive. Lin Zhong landed on the ground and was so excited that he couldn't speak coherently. He had gone all out in the battle and almost went crazy. He was worried about Lin Sun's safety. Now seeing Lin Sun come out alive, it could be imagined how surprised and excited he was. I'm fine. Grandad Zhong, do you know this man? Lin Sun pointed to the black-robed man's corpse on the ground, not far away. At a glance, Lin Zhong's face suddenly changed, as if he had been struck by lightning. His pupils dilated, and he cried out involuntarily, "How could it be him?" Lin Sun suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. Lin Zhong's reaction suddenly reminded him of the crazy words of the black-robed man before his death. Whoosh! Almost subconsciously, Lin Sun waved his sleeves and put away the black-robed man's corpse. Then he said in a low voice, "Grandad Zhong, it's not safe to stay here for a long time. Let's go back first." Lin Zhong also seemed to wake up at this moment. He nodded heavily with a trace of trance between his eyebrows. Obviously, the identity of the black-robed man had brought him an unprecedented impact. Immediately, they flashed away and disappeared in the drizzle. On the same day that the conference ended, the news about Lin Sun's assassination spread like wildfire in the Forbidden City and set off a great wave. Many practitioners were moved and palpitated. Now Lin Sun was a famous young grandmaster of spiritual tattoos. But on the same day that he released the death of shattering, he suffered a bloody attack. Who did it on Earth? The answer unanimously pointed to the 3 top aristocratic forces, Qi family, Zhou family and Qin family. Because it was known that they had an irreconcilable hatred with Lin Sun. But no one was sure because it involved too much. The power of the top aristocratic families was enough to make any practitioner tremble with fear and not dare to talk nonsense. Chapter 524. Heart-Cleansing Peak. It was foggy and windy. In the heart-cleansing hall, there were only Lin Sun, Lin Zhong, Vulture and Young Ku. Lin Sun's left arm injury had been treated. His body had been repeatedly tempered by the power of Amrita Saint Pearl and contained abundant vitality. Even if he didn't apply medicine, he could fully recover in a few days. Lin Feifeng, I didn't expect it to be him. Vulture murmured with some emotion. On the ground there was a cold corpse. It was the black-robed man whose soul was devoured by spirit-eating bugs. But no one, including Lin Sun, expected that the real identity of the black-robed man was Lin Feifeng, the ancestor of Flying Peak Lin. According to the seniority, Lin Sun had to call him fourth grandpa. The atmosphere in the hall was very heavy. Lin Sun was silent, but he finally understood why Lin Feifeng roared at Lin Sun before he died and said that Lin Sun was committing treason against his ancestors. At that time, he must have known the identity of young master, but he still wanted to capture and kill young master at all costs. It was more than cruel. He was worse than a beast. How could he face the ancestors of Lin family? It's a shame. Lin Zhong let out a low roar with his eyes wide open. He seemed to lose his composure. He didn't expect that it was one of Lin family who attacked Lin Sun this time. How cruel it was for an elder to capture and kill a junior of Lin family. How cruel his temperament was. Fortunately, young master is safe this time. If he killed young master in the end, I would slaughter Flying Peak Lin at any cost. Lin Zhong was so angry that he couldn't control himself at all. Grandad Zhong, calm down. I've expected this day, but I didn't expect it to happen so fast. Lin Sun, who had been silent all the time, finally opened his mouth. He looked very calm without any emotional fluctuation. But the calmer he was, the more painful it was for Lin Zhong. Young master wanted to restore the former glory of Lin family. How could he know that it was not those enemies who hurt him the most, but his own clansmen? Why did they do this? Can't they tolerate young master being in charge of Lin family? Lin Zhong murmured. It's very simple. With the strong rise of Lin Sun, they have been restless. If they don't take action now, they won't have a chance to eradicate Lin Sun in the future. At this moment, Vulture appeared to be very calm as he analyzed in a soft voice. However, their assassination operation this time must have the support of other great powers. Otherwise, with their courage, they would definitely not dare to carry out such a crazy operation. Because once they fail, the consequences are not something they can bear. Lin Zhong was dazed for a moment. Mr. Spiritual Vulture, are you saying that the Qi, the Zhua, and the Qin families are behind this? Vulture nodded. Damn it. Lin Zhong gritted his teeth so hard that they almost broke. In those days, these three collateral forces colluded with foreign enemies and divided up the property of Lin family. He hadn't settled the score yet. Now, they didn't hesitate to cooperate with foreign enemies again to assassinate Lin Sun. Vulture looked at Lin Sun. Now that Lin Feifeng is dead, Flying Peak Lin has no leader. This is the best time to take them back. Sitting there in silence, Lin Sun shook his head and said, As I said, I will give them 3 years to consider. During this period I will not take action. Young master, they have become insatiable. They don't put your suggestion in their eyes at all. Now they even want to kill you. Are we just going to sit back and wait for death? Lin Zhong was puzzled and felt indignant for Lin Sun. Lin Sun is too kind. He doesn't want to kill them and hopes that those collateral clansmen can repent and turn over a new leaf. Young Ku, who had been silent all the time, sighed softly. She knew Lin Sun best. When facing his enemies, he would definitely be ruthless. But when facing his own clansmen, he couldn't completely harden his heart. That's good. Unexpectedly, Vulture said, the death of Lin Feifeng is undoubtedly a wake-up call for the three collateral forces. It is enough to make them realize that they can't hurt Lin Sun at all. I believe that even if they hate Lin Sun in the future, they will not dare to act rashly. Lin Sun frowned. But what if Qi, Zhua and Qin families help him? Vulture smiled slightly, with a touch of wisdom in his clear eyes. They have lost the best opportunity to assassinate Lin Sun. Unless Lin Sun leaves the Forbidden City in the future, they will not dare to do it again. Why? Lin Zhong was a little surprised. Because Lin Sun has proved his value to the whole world. Now he is a grandmaster of spiritual tattoos, who can refine armors with spiritual tattoos. The imperial family, Green Deer School or some other big forces will never tolerate this kind of thing to happen a second time. Vulture said calmly, if I guess right, the Empire will make a clear statement about this today. This time, even Lin Sun and Young Ku were touched and lost in thought. As Vulture expected, on the same day, the imperial family issued a declaration to the whole world that the Forbidden City was the center of the empire. No matter who dared to use force here without authorization, he would be severely punished. The content of the declaration was very broad, but the meaning couldn't be more obvious. Especially just today, Lin Sun had just experienced an assassination. The imperial family issued such a declaration, which was obviously to warn some forces that whoever dared to assassinate Lin Sun in the Forbidden City would suffer the wrath of the imperial family. This made the whole audience burst into an uproar. Earlier, many people thought that Lin Sun had completely offended the royal family of the empire by forcing Marquis Lingtian to kneel down. Who could imagine that at such a moment, the imperial family would disregard the former enmity and take the initiative to defend Lin Sun resolutely against the assassination? This was too unexpected. However, it also made everyone realize that from the moment Lin Sun could refine the armor with spiritual tattoos, he had become different. His value was so great that it could change the attitude of the imperial family to a certain extent. On the same day, the headquarters of the Commune of Spiritual Tattooists, the Green Deer School, the Keystone Business, the Blood King Ning family, the Tumbler family, the Yi family, the Lord of the East Sea and other huge forces issued statements one after another, strongly condemning the assassination and making it clear that they would support the decision of the imperial royal family and would never tolerate similar things to happen again. When these statements were issued one after another, it was like thunder after thunder, causing the Forbidden City to be shaken. It was extremely rare in the history of the Empire that so many huge forces expressed their support for Lin Sun at the same time. Who could imagine that Lin Sun, a young man who had just entered the Forbidden City for less than a year, had such a great reputation now? Everyone realized that Lin Sun had completely risen. He was no longer comparable to the past. Now he could make many big forces shout for him and change the attitude of the imperial family. His prestige was so great that it surpassed the Forbidden City. I'm afraid that Lin family of Heart Cleansing Peak will rise again in the Forbidden City with Lin Sun in the future. Many people expressed similar feelings. Under such circumstances, I'm afraid that Qi, Zhua and Qin families dare not act rashly again. This was the opinion of most people. On this day, the three collateral forces of Westbrook family, Floating Cloud family and Flying Peak family were all gloomy and frightened. Perhaps they didn't expect that Lin Sun had such great influence that all the major forces of the empire clearly expressed their support for him. They didn't know whether Lin Sun would suddenly come out to settle accounts with them or what terrible suppression they would suffer with the rise of Lin Sun. But they all knew that they had lost the foundation and strength to deal with Lin Sun again. They were doomed to have a hard time in the future. On this day, the Forbidden City was undoubtedly a stage for Lin Sun alone. His press conference, his assassination experience, and the clear statement made by the imperial family and the major forces caused a lot of discussion, uproar and boiling voices under the sky of the Forbidden City like one uproar after another. Lin Sun. The name seemed to have magic power. It had never been silent or dim since it appeared in the Forbidden City for the first time. Lin Sun had to return to Green Deer School in advance. After learning that he was assassinated and injured, many forces sent representatives to visit Heart Cleansing Peak with various gifts. In addition to Keystone Business, Ning family, Yi family and Gong family, some other forces that he had never contacted at all also took this opportunity to visit him. Because there were too many visitors, it would take a long time to receive them one by one. In desperation, Lin Sun could only choose to avoid them and leave everything to Lin Zhong and Vulture. However, what made Lin Sun speechless was that it was not peaceful when he returned to Green Deer School. As soon as he came back, Shen Tua happily told him that all the instructors of Spiritual Tattoo Branch decided to elect Lin Sun as the Deputy Dean of Spiritual Tattoo Branch after a unanimous consultation. For a young man, this was an extremely rare honor, and it could even be said to be an action that created history. After all, in the past years of Green Deer School, there was no one as young as Lin Sun who could serve as the Deputy Dean. However, this proposal was flatly rejected by Lin Sun. Nowadays, he was too conspicuous and attracted too much attention. As the saying went, people are afraid of fame as pigs are afraid of being fat. In this special period, if he continued to assume the responsibility of Deputy Dean of the Spiritual Tattoo Branch, he was bound to attract more attention. This made Shen Tua disappointed and he left with a loss. Lin Sun also smiled bitterly. What he wanted to do at present was to stay dormant and keep a low profile for a while as much as possible. He didn't want to attract attention and discussion at all. However, when Lin Sun decided to stay silent for a while, he found it too difficult. Not long after Shen Tua left, Zhao Tailai, with a kind smile on his face, came with Princess Jing Xian dressed as a man. Almost at the same time, an unexpected big shot also came to visit Lin Sun, which made Lin Sun feel flattered. Chapter 525. In a hall of Spiritual Tattoo Yard, Zhao Tailai and Princess Jing Xian had been waiting for a long time. There was no need to guess that they were here to refine the Nine-Dragon Cauldron. Lin Sun had already promised them, so he couldn't refuse them. But when he just arrived at the hall, an unexpected big shot came with him, which made Lin Sun feel flattered. When they saw the man, Zhao Tailai and Zhao Jingxian were both stunned and quickly got up to salute. The man had a lean face and an indifferent temperament, like a leisurely cloud or a wild crane, with a kind of transcendent aura. He was the dean of Green Deer School. Lin Sun didn't expect that this legendary figure, who had always been elusive, would take the initiative to find him. Please wait a moment. I have a small matter to solve with Lin Sun. The dean spoke in a calm voice, with an irresistible persuasiveness. Although Lin Sun was puzzled, he naturally wouldn't refuse. He immediately left the hall with the dean. Even the dean came to invite him in person. It seems that this boy is more valued than I thought. Zhao Tailai sighed with emotion. Ninth uncle, do you know what realm this dean has cultivated to now? Zhao Jingxian asked softly. She was still dressed in purple, with red lips and white teeth. She was elegant, with a natural spirit of purity between her eyebrows. After thinking for a long time, Zhao Tailai said softly, "It is as vast as an abyss and unfathomable." Zhao Jingxian raised her eyebrows and was shocked. Whoosh! Lin Sun was led by the dean. As the dean took a step, he suddenly felt that the stars were moving in front of him, as if he was shuttling through the river of time. When his vision became clear, he had come to a beautiful green mountain surrounded by fairy mist. There was a gurgling stream, and beside the stream was a simple thatched hut that could only shelter him from the wind and rain. Lin Sun was in a trance and blurted out, "Senior, is this the void-moving method?" It was really shocking. One moment he was still in Spiritual Tattoo Yard, and the next moment, he appeared in front of this quiet and refined mountain, which seemed to be isolated from the world. Everything happened in the blink of an eye, but it was as if they had traveled through a different world. It was no different from the legendary void teleportation technique. This is just a small technique. It's just a little bit of the secret of the void shifting. When you step into the wheel-developing realm, you will be able to touch this path. The headmaster answered casually, then pointed to the grass hut by the stream in the distance and said, "An old friend is waiting for you. Go." Only then did Lin realize that it was not the dean who summoned him this time, but someone else. Who could it be? Lin Sun walked over. The thatched cottage was simple and stood towering at the bank of the stream. Behind it was the green mountain that was enshrouded in immortal radiance, causing it to be quiet, tranquil, and quiet. It naturally carried a natural aura of simplicity. Lin Sun stood in front of the cottage and said in a low voice, "Greetings, Senior. Come in, no need to be so polite." A benevolent voice rang out. Lin Sun was shocked and pushed the door in. Sure enough, he saw a familiar figure of an old friend. It was an old man with silver hair and a beard. He was dressed in a well-fitting court suit, and his back was ramrod straight. Even though he was sitting cross-legged on a praying mat, he still gave off a feeling of sitting upright and steady, and his etiquette was impeccable. The old man who followed the Queen of the Dark Night. "Senior, why are you here?" Lin Sun was surprised. He had heard some time ago that the Queen of the Dark Night was going to cross the first tribulation of longevity. In order to avoid being destroyed by her enemies, she took away the entire Dark Night shrine. Lin Sun thought that he would not see the old man again for a long time. He never thought that he would appear in Green Deer School at this moment. "Sit down. I don't have much time. This time I'm just an incarnation of my will. It won't take long for me to disappear," the old man said with a smile, as gentle and kind as before. Lin Sun nodded and sat cross-legged on the other side. Then he keenly noticed that the old man's breath was indeed a little different. It seemed a little illusory and unpredictable. Was this an incarnation of his will? This made Lin Sun's heart tremble. How terrible the cultivation of the old man was to have such a magical and peerless means. "You probably heard that Miss left Xiao Empire a few days ago and went to a mysterious place to cross the first tribulation of longevity." The old man went straight to the point without any small talk. Perhaps, as he said before, he didn't have much time and this incarnation of his will was about to disappear. "Unfortunately, I failed in the end. I didn't lose to the heavens, nor did I lose to myself. Instead, I lost to the hands of my enemy." The old man sighed softly. The unwillingness in his voice moved Lin Sun. The first tribulation of longevity failed? Didn't this mean that the mysterious Queen of the Dark Night Miss didn't die? The old man suddenly said, "Because when the real tribulation of longevity came, Miss was already in a dangerous situation. Knowing that she would fail, she used the skill of cicada shedding to save her life. However, for a long time, Miss could only live in silence." Lin Sun breathed a sigh of relief. He couldn't help thinking of the Queen of the Dark Night. It was a woman with graceful bearing that could be described as reaching the heavens. Her long hair was coiled up high and held into a slanted bun with a black hollowed-out phoenix wooden hairpin. She looked very young and her skin was tender, white and tender. Her pair of azure eyes contained a type of indifference that was unique to those in a superior position. The thing that left the deepest impression on Lin Sun was that on her slender and white right pinky finger was a ring that was inlaid with a black gem. The shape of the ring was like an open vertical pupil, and it was incomparably terrifying, seeming like the opened eye of a devil from hell that was capable of reaping souls. It was undeniable that this woman was classical, elegant and beautiful. She exuded loneliness and darkness, which belonged to the indifference and majesty of a superior. No one could see her appearance clearly, because in people's eyes, she was like a shadow bathed in the darkness, which seemed to make everything in the world sink. Even if Lin Sun didn't like the Queen of the Dark Night, he couldn't deny that this woman was too unique and powerful. As long as he thought of her, he could deeply recall every detail about her. If such a mysterious queen was disturbed by the enemy and destroyed the opportunity to pass the test and live a long life, the whole world would be in a great shock. Suddenly, Lin Sun, who was thinking quickly, was awakened by a wave of power. He saw the old man opposite him took out a black jade with a length of 3 meters. At first glance, it was like a coffin, dark as the eternal night, filled with a trace of loneliness and coldness. However, these were not important. Lin Sun's eyes were directly attracted by the scene inside the black jade. There was a little girl in a black cloak, with the brim of the hat covering most of her face, revealing a small part of her slender white chin. Her hands were interlaced on her lower abdomen, forming a strange gesture. She lay there quietly, as if falling into an eternal sleep, quiet and serene. Xia Ji. Lin Sun's heart trembled, and his pupils dilated. How could he expect that he would meet Xia Ji in this way at this moment? It had been nearly 3 years. After the little girl was taken away by the Queen of the Dark Night, she disappeared completely as if she had evaporated from the world. Now they finally met again, but Xia was sealed in a black jade. What was going on? Did something happen to her? All of a sudden, Lin Sun's mood fluctuated and he asked, "Senior, what's going on?" "She's fine, but she's undergoing a transformation," the old man explained softly. "Transformation?" "Yes, transformation." The old man looked calm, and there was a kind of reassuring power. Xia Ji inherited Mrs. Mantle. Since she entered the castle of the Dark Knight, she began to practice the 9 cycles of nirvana. Every time her power awakened, it would be accompanied by a nirvana, which would produce a transformation similar to reincarnation. A few days ago, Xia Ji had reached the level of reincarnation and began the first nirvana reincarnation. All the power she had cultivated before would be turned into a kind of potential, which would make her body, bones, and talents undergo a new transformation. However, once she awakens this time, she'll have to start cultivating anew. In other words, her cultivation and attainments from before nirvana and reincarnation no longer exist, and they've transformed into a form of potential instead. They've become a form of foundation for her to cultivate anew. Lin Sun was shocked. What kind of cultivation was this? How could it be so amazing? Nirvana once was like cutting off all the cultivation to nourish oneself and cultivate from the beginning. This was like reincarnation again and again, which was too shocking. Lin Sun even found it hard to believe that there was such a mysterious cultivation method in the world. It was incredible and beyond imagination. Before the nirvana, Xia Ji said that she must stay with you to cultivate after the transformation, otherwise she would rather fall into the eternal nirvana. The old man's expression was a little complicated. Lin Sun felt an indescribable warmth and guilt in his heart. It turned out that this little girl had been thinking about him all the time. Even knowing this, Lin Sun was still a little puzzled and asked, why did she do this? Because every nirvana not only cuts off the cultivation, but also the memory of the past. She is afraid to forget you. The old man said the real reason. Lin Sun's pupils suddenly shrank. Memory loss. When he thought that Xia Ji could no longer remember him or the past after she woke up, Lin Sun suddenly had a kind of unspeakable anger in his heart. What the hell was this cultivation method? It was true that this cultivation method was amazing, but how cruel it was to make people lose the memory of the past every nirvana. Lin Sun's face became a little gloomy. If he had known this, he would rather Xia Ji had not been taken away by the Queen of the Dark Night. A touch of apology flashed between the old man's eyebrows. When he was about to say something, he heard a series of cracking sounds. The black jade, which was about 3 meters long, was actually broken at this moment. Had Xia Ji's transformation been completed? Lin Sun's heart suddenly tightened, and he suddenly didn't dare to face it. He was afraid that when Xia Ji woke up, she had forgotten everything and regarded him as a stranger. Chapter 526. Crack. Finally, with a loud crack, the black jade suddenly turned into debris and poured down. At the same time, Xia Ji, who seemed to be sleeping in it, stood up. Just like in the past, her figure was still delicate and seemed as if it had never changed. She wore a black cloak while her face was concealed by the brim of her hat, and she stood there silently while her entire body was suffused with strands of the faint aura of the silent night. Looking at the time, it's about time for him to wake up. A hint of gratification and excitement appeared on the old man's benevolent face. Xia Ji stood there quietly, as if she didn't notice it. Lin Sun was stunned at the moment. He opened his mouth and wanted to call out Xia Ji's name, but he was worried that she didn't recognize him. If so, it would be a heavy blow. Lin Sun struggled in his heart, and his face was cloudy. If she lost her memory of the past, would she still be the Xia Ji he knew? There was a moment of silence in the hut. The old man sighed softly, seeming to understand Lin Sun's mood at the moment. He said with pity, "You don't have to be depressed and sad. As far as I know, after experiencing 9 quietus, the memory of the past will be reopened and turned into various experiences and perceptions, which will be regained by her." Lin Sun's face was gloomy. 9 quietus? How long would it take? The most terrible thing was, what if Xia Ji failed in her cultivation? Could she still remember him? Suddenly Lin Sun stiffened. He noticed that Xia Ji, who was not far away, looked at him and said, "Lin Sun, I'm hungry." The voice was crisp, quiet and ethereal, just like before. But such a simple sentence made Lin Sun and the old man dull in an instant. They couldn't believe their ears. Xia Ji actually called out Lin Sun's name. Didn't it mean that she still remembered Lin Sun? The irritation, frustration and anger in Lin Sun's heart were completely replaced by a touch of excitement and surprise at this moment. He said in a trembling voice, "Xia Ji, do you still remember me?" Xia Ji was obviously stunned and asked doubtfully, "When did I forget you?" Lin Sun grinned brilliantly. His heart was completely replaced by ecstasy. He suddenly stood up, held Xia Ji in his arms and laughed, "Haha, you still remember me? The heavens have eyes, making me worry for nothing, ha ha." The old man, on the other hand, was slightly surprised and bewildered, and his expression was solemn. Could it be that Nirvana failed? Why did Xia Ji retain the memory of Lin Sun? Being picked up by Lin Sun and looking at his ecstatic and idiot-like smile, Xia Ji couldn't help but frown her delicate eyebrows. She became more and more confused. "Lin Sun, how did you become so childish?" Childish? Lin Sun's face froze for a moment, and then he became more delighted. Wasn't this Xia Solstice's style of speaking? She was always so independent and quiet, completely different from her peers. "Xia Ji, did you make a mistake when you were cultivating the Nirvana 9-turn scripture?" The old man couldn't help but ask. Xia Ji's voice suddenly became cold. "Lin Sun, who is he?" The old man was stunned and so was Lin. "You don't recognize him?" Summer Solstice shook her head. "No, I don't." Now, both Lin Sun and the old man realized that something was wrong. Lin put Xia Ji down and whispered, "Xia Ji, can you tell me what you remember now?" Xia Ji thought for a moment and said, "I've forgotten everything except for the things related to you." Her tone was flat and her voice was ethereal, as if she didn't care about these things. Perhaps in her opinion, as long as she could remember Lin Sun, it didn't matter if she forgot everything in this world. Lin Sun couldn't help laughing again. He suddenly found that as long as Xia Ji remembered him, other things were indeed not important. "Let me have a check." The old man stepped forward and grabbed Xia Ji's wrist. But before he could hold it firmly, Xia Ji suddenly broke free from his grasp. Her white and delicate fingers poked at the old man's eyes like lightning. Simple, direct, and ruthless. It made Lin Sun seem to go back to the time when he was in Feiyun village. At that time, Xia Ji killed fierce beasts and fought with him in the same way. It was almost an instinct, but it was terrifyingly accurate. Obviously, Xia Ji had forgotten the old man and regarded him as a stranger. Being approached by the old man, Xia Ji made a fierce and ruthless counterattack at the first time. However, Xia Ji's counterattack was doomed to be in vain. She was easily imprisoned by the old man. At the same time, Lin Sun also said in a hurry, "This old man is not a bad person. He is just checking your body." Old man? The old man couldn't help but want to roll his eyes. But seeing that Xie Zhi really calmed down and no longer resisted, the old man didn't bother to care about it. After a while, the old man loosened his hand and was a little stunned. "Senior, how is it?" Lin Sun asked. "There is no problem. The first transformation is very successful. 9 cycles of Nirvana Sutra has become a kind of instinct for her, leaving no trace of regret." "But," the old man frowned, "how can she still remember you? Isn't it better?" Lin Sun smiled very happily. "Alas." The old man sighed softly. He was also a little confused. Perhaps, only when the Dark Night Queen woke up from her silence could he give a clear explanation. "Lin Sun, I am hungry." Xie Zhi spoke again, her voice was as clear as the sound of nature. Lin Sun immediately stopped thinking about other things and said excitedly, "I am going to roast fish for you." He rushed out of the thatched hut and gathered materials on the spot. He directly caught more than 10 extremely plump big fish from the stream next to him and started a bonfire. After slaughtering and cleaning the big fish, he directly skewered them with a spirit sword and began to roast them. There was no seasoning, but these fish contained traces of spiritual power. After roasting, there was a natural fresh and tender fragrance, which was also a unique flavor. Xie Zhi followed him out, sitting quietly next to Lin Sun with her white and slender hands around her knees. At this time, it was already dusk. The sunset glow on the horizon was like fire, dyeing the green mountain red, sprinkling orange afterglow. By the clear stream, the bonfire was raging, and the roast fish was burnt yellow with oil, exuding a tempting fragrance. Lin Sun and Xie Zhi sat there side by side. The picture was very beautiful. In front of the hut, the old man stared at this scene for a long time and finally smiled with relief. Perhaps she would have a completely different kind of understanding if she stayed with Lin Sun to cultivate. "Are you leaving?" Suddenly, the dean appeared in front of the hut. The old man nodded. Before Miss fell silent, she had a warning sign that the great way of heaven and earth had begun to change. "Maybe it won't be long before a great world war begins. If you are interested, you can also make early preparations. Xiao Empire will be abandoned by the great way of heaven and earth after all. Don't worry. There is still a long time before the Great World War. Compared with the ancient Desolation Realm, this place is very small, but it is not as simple as it seems. Otherwise, your miss would not have stayed here for so many years." The dean's words were casual and calm. "Maybe. Before I leave, I have a presumptuous request. Please don't interfere with her cultivation." The old man looked at Xie Zhi beside the bonfire. "Her cause and effect are too entangled with your dark night shrine. Of course, I won't interfere with it." The dean readily agreed. "Thank you." The old man's figure became blurred, turned into a colorful rain of light, and disappeared. His task had been completed. Although Xie Zhi still retained the memory of Lin Sun after the first transformation of quietus, it did not affect her cultivation. That was enough. "Take care, Taoism peer." The dean cupped his hands in the distance, and a pair of vicissitudes of life surged with a deep light, as if he could see through the mystery of the world. Immediately, his eyes fell on Lin Sun and Xie Zhi, and he was lost in thought. Finally, he shook his head silently and let out a sigh. Not only Xie Zhi, but also Lin Sun's path of cultivation would not be easily interfered with. Since he saw Lin Sun's uniqueness in the Sea Spirit list, he knew that this young man had his own path, and he couldn't interfere with it. Perhaps what he could do was to give a silent protection in the Green Deer School. After all, Lin Sun had an inseparable relationship with the Green Deer School, and he could not turn a blind eye to it. Xie Zhi ate very delicately, just like herself, which gave people a sense of tranquility, but it did not mean that she was slow. She tore the crystal-clear fish meat with her small hands and chewed it with her small mouth. Every time she finished eating a fish, It must be the time when Lin Sun roasted another fish. The timing was extremely precise. Her little belly was like a bottomless pit. After eating more than 10 big fish, she carefully wiped her mouth and commented, "Lin Sun, the taste is a little bland. Remember to put more salt next time." Lin Sun was speechless. Xie Ji had always been so direct. Immediately, he patted his forehead and stood up. "I forgot one thing." Night fell. In the hall, Zhao Tailai muttered with great dissatisfaction, "The taste of the tea is almost bland, but the boy still doesn't show up. He is too presumptuous." Zhao Jingxian was calm and said with a smile, "Ninth uncle, how can your mouth be bland?" Zhao Tailai was embarrassed and stared at her. "Nonsense, this is a dirty word. How can you ask like this?" Zhao Jingxian said with a smile, "Now that I know you are swearing in front of me, aren't you worried that I will tell my father?" At this time, Lin Sun appeared. Zhao Tailai immediately changed the topic and said angrily, "Boy, you are a little unkind. You leave us here and don't care about it? Isn't this the invitation of the dean? How dare I neglect you too?" Lin Sun shrugged. Zhao Tailai rolled his eyes at once. Lin Sun said the name of the dean, which really made him speechless. Did he dare to blame the dean of Green Deer School? That was no different from courting death. "Taoism Peer Lin Sun, it's getting late. I'll make a long story short. You must know why we are here. When are you going to start?" Zhao Jingxian stood up and said with a smile. She was elegant and outstanding. Even if she was disguised as a man, her clear and bright beauty could not be hidden. Lin Sun said very straightforwardly, 7 days later. "I need to take advantage of this time to prepare for it." "Good." There was a touch of appreciation in Zhao Jingxuan's eyes. Chapter 527. In the end, Zhao Tailai handed a storage bag and a blueprint to Lin Sun. In the storage bag, there were more than 1,000 kinds of spiritual materials needed to refine the treasure cauldron of 9 dragons, among which hundreds were peerless treasures. The blueprint was the design plan of refining the treasure cauldron of 9 dragons. It was obvious that the blueprint was old and yellowed, with the air of the precipitation of time. According to Zhao Tailai's introduction, the founding emperor once owned a treasure cauldron of 9 dragons, but it was destroyed in a battle. Since then, the royal family of the empire had always hoped to refine a treasure cauldron of 9 dragons again. Unfortunately, the requirements of refining this cauldron were so difficult that no one had been able to refine it until now. Lin Sun opened the blueprint and browsed through it. Soon, he was attracted by the wonderful ideas in it. After a long time, he came to his senses, exhaled a long breath, and exclaimed, "The design idea of this cauldron is absolutely the most wonderful one I have ever seen. It can be called a wonderful workmanship, which is rare. I was greatly inspired and learned a lot from it." Speaking of this, he suddenly looked at Zhao Tailai and Zhao Jingxian. "Aren't you worried that I will leak this blueprint?" Zhao Tailai suddenly laughed with a contemptuous look, as if saying that Lin Sun was really shallow and ignorant. Even Zhao Jingxian couldn't help but smile and explained, "Even if this blueprint falls into the hands of others, it is just a pile of waste paper and useless. First, it is because those who are not spiritual tattooists have no ability to refine this cauldron. Second, the spiritual materials needed to refine this cauldron are too rare. Even with the power of the royal family, it has taken them thousands of years to collect all the spiritual materials needed." Lin Sun suddenly understood and sighed in his heart. Yes, this treasure cauldron of 9 dragons was a peerless armor with spiritual tattoos. The precious spiritual materials needed to refine it were almost beyond the reach of most people in the world. In this case, even if the blueprint was lost, it would not have a big impact at all. Lin Sun studied the blueprint carefully for a while and finally nodded. "I am very interested in refining this cauldron, but I am afraid it will take a lot of time." "It doesn't matter. As long as you can refine it, I can wait." Zhao Jingxuan's clear eyes lit up, revealing a trace of joy. It would be best if he could finish it within 3 months. Soon, my nephew will leave the Empire and return to the ancient Desolation Realm, Zhao Tailai said in a low voice. It should be no problem, Lin Sun agreed after thinking for a while. Thank you, fellow practitioner Lin Sun. Zhao Jingxian cupped his hands and said. Just call me Lin Sun. Lin Sun smiled. He had always had a good impression of Zhao Jingxian. Although she was a girl, she was not inferior to any extraordinary man in the world in terms of breadth of mind and style. Zhao Jingxian nodded and stared at Lin Sun with her clear eyes. Suddenly, she laughed out, revealing her white teeth and said, Although I know you have seen through my identity, you still call me Zhao Xian. She was clear and beautiful. Even though she was disguised as a man, when she revealed a brilliant smile at this moment, her lips were moist and bright red while her teeth were snow white, and she actually emanated a unique aura of beauty that seemed capable of seizing all beauty. That's the best. Lin Sun also smiled. Zhao Tailai couldn't stand it anymore. He felt that Lin Sun's smile was extremely obscene at this moment. It seemed that he was deliberately getting close to Zhao Jingxian, which made Zhao Tailai want to beat him up. He coughed and said angrily, Well, that's it. We'll leave now. After that, he pulled Zhao Jingxuan's sleeves and left in a hurry without looking back. Lin Sun, I'll wait for your good news. Zhao Jingxian waved goodbye. Lin Sun nodded with a smile and watched them leave. Then he murmured, It turns out that the princess is also so beautiful. Immediately, he shook his head. Zhao Jingxuan's identity was too honorable, like the sun and the moon in the sky. Her father was the current emperor, and her mother was the current empress. Even her master was an ancient Pure Land in the ancient Desolation Realm. If he dared to have any ideas, he would be hunted down by the imperial family in the first place. From this day on, with Xia Ji by his side, Lin Sun felt like he had returned to the days in Feiyun village. There was a kind of indescribable tranquility and steadiness in his heart. Moreover, Lin Sun had retreated to the 9th floor of the spiritual cultivation tower again. But unlike last time, Xia Ji was also there. The discussions and disturbances in the outside world seemed to have gone away and could no longer affect Lin Sun's state of mind. Perhaps this was called hiding in a small building and becoming unified, regardless of the winter, summer, spring, and autumn. Time passed day by day. Lin Sun was very calm when he refined the treasure cauldron of 9 dragons this time. He was neither fast nor slow and composed. When he was busy, he forgot to eat and sleep. When he was free, he would chat with Xia Ji. It was a very fulfilling and peaceful life. Xia Ji ate and slept every day. When she was quiet, she didn't speak for a whole day. She seemed very well behaved. Her previous cultivation had been destroyed, but Lin Sun could feel that her strength was increasing at a constant speed almost every moment. This was amazing. However, when he thought about it, it had only been 3 years since Xia Ji left him, and she was able to step into the reincarnation development realm in cultivation. Everything did not seem so strange. According to the old man of the Dark Night Shrine, after the first nirvana of the 9 cycles scripture of nirvana, her previous cultivation and cultivation would all turn into a huge potential, which would make Xia Ji undergo a new transformation. It could be imagined that, under such circumstances, Xia Ji's cultivation must have become different from usual. This made Lin Sun sigh with emotion occasionally. People called him a heaven-defying evildoer, but he couldn't find anything to be proud of, whether compared with Zhao Jingxian or Xia Ji. This was indeed a big blow. Fortunately, Lin Sun's Taoist heart was firm enough. He knew clearly that as long as he continued to cultivate, he would not necessarily be worse than others. Who would be the first in the struggle for the Tao? One should always look at things from a broad perspective. It was too early to say now. When he really stood at the peak of the Tao and competed with the world, it would be the real time to compete. As time went by, the discussion about Lin Sun in the outside world gradually cooled down. After the prosperity and brilliance, everything would eventually return to peace. This was the truth of nature. The world had already recognized Lin Sun's current status and reputation. In the years to come, Lin Sun would shine like a shooting star only for a moment, or would he shine like the sun forever? The outside world was always changing, and there was never a lack of sensational things. It was impossible for one person to dominate and occupy the stage of the storm. Recently, there was suddenly a storm of discussion about the ancient desolation territory in the Forbidden City, which swept the whole city. Have you heard that 20 disciples of the Zhenwu courtyard of Green Deer School, including Gu Yunting, have been sent to the ancient desolation territory for cultivation? It's not just them. There are also some outstanding figures of the younger generation in the 7 great clans and some of the more powerful forces who have left the empire. Why? I heard that it's because the Tao in our empire is incomplete. This situation will get worse and worse in the future, which will seriously affect the cultivation of practitioners. I also heard that if the strong practitioners of Tao Insight Realm don't leave, it is almost impossible for them to break through to the reincarnation developing realm in this life. This has nothing to do with talent and foundation, but because they are affected by the incomplete Tao. Is there going to be a big change? Don't talk nonsense. All these are just rumors. No one can judge whether it's true or not. However, it's definitely a rare blessing to enter the ancient desolation territory for cultivation. It's said that it's a vast pure land for cultivation. It's prosperous and has countless immortals. Similar discussions soon became the hottest topic in the Forbidden City. No one could determine whether it was true or not. But it was not groundless. It had been spread all over the Forbidden City that young Sword King Shai Yutong of Xie family, Song Yunji of Song family, Gu Yunting of Green Deer School, Shi Xuan of Keystone Business and other influential figures of the younger generation who had already reached Tao Insight Realm had left the empire for cultivation in the ancient desolation territory. This made people doubt whether the rumor was true or not. Because of the spread of this storm, even the people of the empire were a little shaken. In the end, it was the royal family of the empire who came forward to suppress this storm. But in the dark, the discussion about this matter had been continuing. Perhaps when a special moment came, there would be a complete outbreak. Lin Sun naturally didn't know all this. He had been on the 9th floor of the spiritual cultivation tower, as if isolated from the world, but it was not boring. He even liked this kind of carefree and peaceful life, where he only needed to concentrate on his work and cultivate steadily. 2 months later, in the 9th floor of the spiritual cultivation tower, there suddenly came a roar like a dragon's roar, which shook the wilderness and shocked many people for a while. But soon, this strange phenomenon quieted down and disappeared, but it did not attract too much attention and discussion. In the 9th floor of the spiritual cultivation tower, 9 phantoms of black dragons were shuttling in the void with their heads held high, making bursts of roars, which shook the void and made circles of ripples. In the center of the 9 phantoms stood a treasure cauldron with 3 feet and 2 handles. Its surface was surging with mysterious and flowing patterns, magnificent and majestic. In the end, the 9 phantoms of black dragons were silent in the treasure cauldron, and the colorful strange phenomenon disappeared. The treasure cauldron became simple, solemn, and magnificent. Looking carefully, the treasure cauldron swallowed the universe with one mouth, hung yin and yang on its 2 handles, and produced all things with its 3 feet. It seemed to have the power to dominate the world and shock the soul. It was done. Lin Sun couldn't help but be fascinated. This was the treasure cauldron of 9 dragons, the legendary armor with spiritual tattoos once used by the founding emperor of the empire. Even if it hadn't passed the test, the power it emitted was still incomparably heavy and majestic, with a kind of grand and infinite charm that could accommodate all ages. Lin Sun, this treasure cauldron has the charm of the emperor. If it is controlled by the emperor's qi, it will have incredible power. Xie Ji was also alarmed. Standing there and staring at the treasure cauldron of 9 dragons, she said in a quiet and ethereal voice. "However, it is not suitable for you. You'd better not think about it, or it will hinder your cultivation." Lin Sun was stunned and couldn't help but be surprised. Xia Ji also knew this? Chapter 528. What Summer Solstice said was right. The Nine-Dragon Cauldron was tailor-made for those who practiced the Imperial Dragon Qi. Only the descendants of emperors like Zhao Jingxian could control it perfectly. Although Lin Sun was envious, he knew that such a treasure was not suitable for him because it conflicted with his cultivation. Clang! Suddenly, Lin Sun took out a black broken blade and exerted force in his palm. The broken blade suddenly burst out with surging starlight, as if a peerless evil spirit had awakened from it. Boom! The Nine-Dragon Cauldron seemed to be provoked. Suddenly, the shadows of 9 dragons appeared on the body of the cauldron. They raised their heads and roared, spreading a power that could suppress the universe. At this moment, it seemed that 2 magic weapons were fighting. The cauldron and the blade were oppressing each other. For a moment, the starlight swept like the Milky Way, and the dragon roared like thunder. They fought fiercely on the 9th floor of the spiritual cultivation tower. Lin Sun stared at this rare confrontation without blinking his black eyes. Boom! Seeing that it couldn't do anything to the Nine-Dragon Cauldron, the broken blade seemed to be enraged. The starlight burst out in all directions and crushed everything. In a trance, it seemed that the stars all over the sky were spreading out and suppressing the Nine-Dragon Cauldron together. The Nine-Dragon Cauldron was surrounded by the magnificent power of Emperor Tao. The 9 dragons soared into the sky, tearing the yin and yang and fighting fiercely in the sea of stars. Seeing that the conflict was getting fiercer and fiercer, and was about to drown the entire 9th floor of the spiritual cultivation tower, Lin Sun stopped it without hesitation. The broken blade suddenly let out a reluctant roar and struggled in Lin Sun's palm, as if it wanted to rush out and split the Nine-Dragon Cauldron. This extraordinary spirituality attracted Summer Solstice in the distance. Her clear and dark eyes like crescent moons slightly narrowed. At the same time, the Nine-Dragon Cauldron also let out a dragon roar, as if it was unwilling to admit defeat. Lin Sun, its creator, also admired it secretly. This treasure was worthy of being a treasure of Emperor Tao. Its spirituality alone had become different from other armors with spiritual tattoos. However, what really surprised Lin Sun was the broken blade in his hand. He got it from the bloodstain of treasures in the ancient spirit world. Its origin was unknown, but its power was undeniable. When Lin Sun saw it for the first time, he saw this blade coming out of nowhere and killing a group of practitioners. Some practitioners of Tao Insight Realm even fled like rats, not daring to face it. Moreover, all of this was caused by a single broken blade, and there was utterly no one controlling it. It was obvious how heaven-defying this treasure's ferocity and intelligence were. Some time ago, Lin Sun had compared this broken blade to Shatter Sorrow, and the result had surprised him as well. Even with the ultimate destructive power of Shatter Sorrow, it couldn't shake or suppress the fierce power of this broken blade for a while. Now, after another comparison with the Nine-Dragon Cauldron, Lin finally came to a clear conclusion. In terms of power and spirituality, this broken blade left from antiquity times was not weaker than any spiritual tattoo armor in the world. Perhaps its only flaw was that it was just an ancient treasure and couldn't be transformed into a battle armor to provide comprehensive support for practitioners. But then again, this was a broken blade. It was damaged, but it was still able to fight against the Nine-Dragon Cauldron and the Shattering Death. One could imagine how terrifying this broken blade would be if it was in its perfect state. I must find a chance to repair this blade in the future. Lin Sun secretly made up his mind. Although he had the attainments of a grandmaster of spiritual tattoos, he couldn't see through the mystery of refining this broken blade. He couldn't even tell what material this broken blade was made of, which made him feel more and more mysterious. He was looking forward to the day when he could repair this broken blade. Lin Sun, where did you get this ancient treasure? I feel the aura of antiquity times from it. It should be at least 100,000 years old. Xia Ji suddenly came over, raised her small face, and said quietly with picturesque eyebrows. She would only show her face under the brim of the hat when there was no one else. Because this was Lin Sun's suggestion, and also because she was too beautiful. Her skin was crystal white without any blemish, and her facial features were exquisite and perfect like a masterpiece of God, almost dreamlike. She seemed to be able to outshine the world and overshadow the world. If she did not conceal her unparalleled beauty, it could cause countless shocks and disturbances. This was not an exaggeration. Since ancient times, there was a saying that beauty was the source of trouble. Xia Ji was still young. When she grew up, only God knew what kind of peerless beauty she would become. 100,000 years? Lin Sun was stunned and said in surprise, "You can still see these things?" Xia Ji kept her eyes on the broken blade in Lin Sun's hand and said, "I can feel that this is a terrible treasure. If it were not incomplete now, it would be impossible for you to control it." Lin Sun's lips twitched. Was she praising the power of this broken blade or taking this opportunity to criticize his weakness? Clang! Suddenly, Xia Ji raised her hand and took out the long spear which was as white as bone. Her clear eyes flashed with eagerness and she said, "Lin Sun, I want to have a try with this broken blade." From the first time Lin Sun met Xia Ji, this white spear had always been with her. Its origin was unknown, and only Xia Ji could use it as if it was one with her. No. Lin Sun refused flatly. He quickly put away the broken blade and said seriously, "These two are good treasures. What if they are damaged?" Xia Ji was stunned and rolled her eyes, which was rare, stingy. Lin Sun grinned. "Do you want me to refine another weapon for you?" Xia Ji refused without hesitation. "No need." She put away the spear and went to the corner. Her delicate body lay on a small bed, and she closed her eyes and fell asleep in the blink of an eye. It was time for Xia Ji's unshakable sleep again. Lin Sun stepped forward and looked at Xia Ji, who was sleeping quietly. Even though they often met, Lin Sun still felt a little dazed and absent-minded every time he saw her beautiful, white and tranquil face. This kind of beauty simply didn't belong to the world. It was so perfect that it made people feel unreal. It was enough to amaze and captivate all living beings. After a long time, Lin Sun smiled and bent over to pick up Xia Ji. He carefully covered her little face with the brim of his hat and turned around to leave the 9th floor of the spiritual cultivation tower. In order to refine the treasure cauldron of 9 dragons, he had been in seclusion for more than 2 months. Now that the treasure was successfully cast, it was time to leave. Lin Sun had a plan in mind. After handing the treasure cauldron of 9 dragons to Zhao Jingxian, he would begin to cultivate stealthily to prepare for breaking through to the Tao Insight realm. As early as a few months ago, he'd already reached an unprecedented extreme in the spiritual ocean tier. His cultivation, soul, and even physique had all attained a perfect and flawless state, and all his potential and reserves had already been developed to the limit. It could be said that at that time, Lin Sun could step into the threshold of Tao Insight realm at any time if he wanted to. But later, because of a coincidence, Lin Sun comprehended a trace of the power of the essence of water from the Sky Ladder Mountain. This made Lin Sun feel that his cultivation was incomplete, so he had never chosen to break through rashly. As far as he was concerned, his cultivation base, soul, and physique had indeed been cultivated to the limits of perfection. However, this sudden addition of a trace of water mentality had allowed him to gain a completely new power and variable in the Sea of Souls realm. At the same time that it allowed him to become more powerful, it also brought about an imperfection in his realm. Perhaps, when a trace of the power of the essence of water was perfectly controlled, it could be called the real perfection and perfection. If this was known by other practitioners, they would definitely go crazy. Other practitioners in the sea spirit realm couldn't wait to break through to the Tao insight realm as soon as possible, but Lin Sun not only cultivated to the extreme, but also tempered the strength of his soul and physique to the extreme. Yet now, he'd even chosen to break through and advance after he'd perfectly grasped that trace of water concept. How could this not cause others to be shocked? The most terrible thing was that among the practitioners in the sea spirit realm in the world, there might not be a monster like Lin Sun who could comprehend and control the power of the essence of the Great Way before he stepped into the Tao insight realm. This was indeed like breaking the previous practice and creating a new miracle. If it was spread out, it would cause a sensation in the cultivation world. Of course, at present, only Lin Sun knew that he had mastered the power of the essence of water. This was his own secret. Lin Sun's exit did not alarm anyone. But to his surprise, Zhao Tailai, the cunning guy, had been waiting there for a long time. It turned out that as early as a few days ago, Zhao Tailai had been waiting for Lin Sun's good news without leaving at all. When Lin Sun threw out a box with the treasure cauldron of 9 dragons, Zhao Tailai's breathing became rapid. Success. Even if he was very confident in Lin Sun, Zhao Tailai still had an indescribable excitement and shock when he was sure that Lin Sun had really succeeded in refining the treasure cauldron of 9 dragons. A treasure that had made many spiritual tattoo grandmasters helpless for thousands of years was actually refined today, which made Zhao Tailai tremble with excitement. If it was known to the outside world that Lin Sun had successfully refined the second piece of armor of spiritual tattoos after a lapse of 2 months, no one knew what kind of sensation it would cause. Of course, neither Lin Sun nor Zhao Tailai would divulge this matter. The 9-dragon cauldron was an important treasure of the royal family, a weapon of Emperor Path. Naturally, it could not be easily divulged. Otherwise, it would arouse many coveting eyes. Good, good, good. Zhao Tailai shouted excitedly and almost danced with joy. His fat cheeks were shaking. He patted Lin Sun's shoulder fiercely. Boy, you have made a great contribution this time. Since I have made a great contribution, do you think you can give me some other rewards? Lin Sun asked with a smile. Zhao Tailai immediately became alert and coughed. Don't worry, the royal family will definitely remember your favor. Well, that's it. I'll go back to report first. Maybe it won't be long before Her Highness Jing Xian comes to thank you in person. Before he could finish his sentence, the fatty had already slipped away like a wisp of smoke, disappearing faster than anyone else. Lin Sun was speechless for a while and cursed the fat man in his heart. It was almost impossible to take advantage of him.